What is not on the agenda, but I'm ever so pleased to announce, Chief Executive has just told me that he is out for quotations for the air conditioning of this chamber.
It's becoming expensive, mine. Times are hard.
Can we have microphones as well?
The first item on the agenda this afternoon is apologies for absence. Councillor Dimitri.
Councillor Jim Higginson.
Okay. Brian Strong.
Councillors Lisa Dimmock, Bob Greenland and Sheila Woodhouse.
Thank you very much. Councillor. Yeah, Debbie. Yeah, Vapor at the back.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor David Jones.
Thank you. Yep. Good afternoon.
Councillor Jez Becker.
Thank you very much indeed. The second item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Anybody got anything they want to declare on today? No. The third item is Chairman's announcements. I have received no petitions, but Councillor Giles Howard would like to make a statement. Councillor Howard.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought it would be appropriate for this council to acknowledge and reflect on the sad passing of Jenny Barnes MBE, who was a resident of my ward. Unlike others, I did not know her either personally or as a friend, but as a tireless and selfless campaigner for the rights of disabled people, for which she was rightly honoured last year. Like me, many members will have encountered Jenny at local meetings, access forums, budget consultations and so on. And I recall it was only a few short years ago that she joined senior officers and myself on a recce to Cardiff and Barry when we were looking at delivering a new library in Abergavenny, an example of how she gave her time freely and to try and shape services for the better. I hope that at the very least our future decision making will be guided by the principles that she stood for, since many of those for whom she spoke will have lost one of their most ardent supporters.
Thank you very much indeed. We now go on to the item 4. Sorry, Councillor Fox.
Yes, thanks, Chair. If I could reflect further on that, and I thank Giles for raising that. It was with such sad news. We learned of Jenny's passing last week, and she had been through an awful lot these last few weeks and months, and losing her husband as well. But she was just such a stalwart. I've known Jenny for many, many years, championing the needs of the disabled and other causes, championing hard in this arena often, and lobbying the likes of myself and colleagues about the access for all and the work of care. You know, she was a massive driving force for good, and she will be really missed. Even though, you know, at times she would challenge me all the time, but I had massive respect for her, as did the wider community, and of course being recognised with an MBE in the last year's honours list. She will be missed, and I hope perhaps when we get details we can circulate those of what the arrangements are.
Thank you very much. Okay, we can now go on to item 4, public open forum, which I don't think we have anybody present this afternoon. So we go on to item 5, which is to confirm the minutes of the meetings held here, firstly on the 8th of May.
Move.
Thank you very much. No? Somebody second those then, please. Okay. Nobody wants to bring any matters up? We go on to the second set of minutes.
Move.
Thank you. And seconded. Thank you. Anybody got any matters arising from those? No. Then we go on to item 7 on the agenda, the minutes of the Democratic Services Committee held on the 12th of March. All right. Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Anybody any questions on those? Councillor Dovey? No, not a question, just seconded. Okay, any questions? And in my haste, we better go back to item 6, which I've absolutely missed. As the meeting of the Public Service Board held on the 4th of April.
And Chairman, I'd like to present those minutes, even though I wasn't at that meeting, but I'm sure the Chief Executive's Chair would fill us in if anything, questions were asked.
Okay. Any questions to those minutes? The heat must be getting at you all. All right, we go on then now to item 8, which is the minutes of the Audit Committee held on the 8th of March.
Chairman, in Councillor Higginson's absence, can I present those for agreement?
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor. Are there any points arising from those minutes? I thought we were quick last month. It's going to be quicker than last month at this rate. No? Okay. All in agreement with those minutes. Please show. There we go. Right. The next item is the notes of the County Council action list on page 33. That's if you've got hard copy. Yeah. Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon to you.
Thank you.
Chairman, finally we seem to have resolved to get Monmouthshire Housing to the table, and I thank Kelly for that, and also I thank Kelly next month on all the hard work. So I know that will happen in our next meeting. Chairman, is the mic working? No. Chairman, I'm really disappointed it's taken so long to get where we've gone, and I know there's a motion today about housing in Monmouthshire, which I will be supporting. I do want to find out what our tenants in Monmouthshire rights are referenced to with our local housing associations or local housing people we have out there, because it is appalling. It's taken 5 months for Monmouthshire Housing to respond to this issue, and this serious issue as well, the blight of their lives. And I thought when I was a member all them years ago, I sat in the housing stock transfer, spent many weeks going through that, and old members will recognise the hard work that we put in as a council. And I agreed to the housing stock transfer on the basis of our tenants will be looked after and their needs will be looked after and their questions and their answers will be addressed. This is not the case, and I totally do not support Monmouthshire Housing anymore. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth. Does anybody else wish to make a comment? Yeah, Councillor Ahmed Watts. Hold on, you're not switched on yet.
I'd like to support Simon in everything he said. I was involved. I was slightly more cynical about the housing stock transfer, and we will talk about that later. But I think what's noticeable over the years is the lack of presence from Monmouthshire Housing. I can't remember. I think the last time I saw John Keegan was actually when we had housing stock transfer. I haven't seen him since. Well, I haven't seen him in this chamber, and we haven't really seen. Well, I haven't seen him, Chair. So, you know, he's been very thin on the ground and making any representation to this council. And they are effectively our partners. They're providing a service for us under contract. They're service level providers. That seems to have been forgotten. So I wonder what they actually are delivering and why they feel that they're not accountable.
Sorry, Chair, I can't hear Councillor Evans. He's not speaking into the microphone.
Members, you don't have to worry about an interest. There is no agenda item, there's no decision.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Members, you'll know that the purpose of the report is to present the proposal to establish a joint overview and scrutiny committee for the Cardiff capital region. I'm sure everybody believes there is a need for such. At the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal meeting on the 20th of November, the Joint Cabinet received a report detailing proposals for the establishment of a joint overview and scrutiny committee for the City Deal, and the report was also included a suggested draft terms of condition for the joint overview and scrutiny committee, which you'll find in one of the joining appendices to today's report. It was agreed by the Joint Cabinet that Bridgend County Borough Council would undertake the role of host authority and would provide the necessary scrutiny support for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee once it's in place. The options for us, or for every council, the 10 councils, the option would be to have a representation on that joint committee or no representation. But as you can see in 4.1, it would be, I think it wouldn't be considered as not in the best interest of this council and our communities if we didn't have a representation. In Appendix A, it provides the context for the proposal to establish the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee and details how it would be implemented. And as I just shared, the terms of reference can be found in Appendices B and B2. This report has been presented to Economy and Development Select Committee prior to coming to Council today. Whilst the nominated scrutiny member, if we are minded to put one forward, need not be drawn from the membership of the Economy and Development Committee, I think it would be good practice, or it's recommended that the member should come from that area. The appointed member, though, more so should have possess the appropriate skills and expertise to represent this council, and should be able to fully commit to the role, which I know any member of this council would do. As you see in 9.1, Economy and Development Select Committee round up with a quote there that the committee can conclude that it would be sensible for the appointed member to derive from the membership of the Economy and Development Select Committee, and members interested in performing the role may choose to make a short presentation of council. Mr. Chairman, I would like to propose, in line really with the protocols we've used in the past with joint overview and scrutiny committees, where the chair and vice chair, or the chair supported by a vice chair, should go of the relevant select committee within the council, should go forward to be the spokesperson or member of the joint overview and select committee. So I'd be more than happy to recommend to this council today that the chair of Economy and Development Select Committee, which in name is Paul Pavia, should be go forward as a member, ably supported by the deputy of that committee, Alan Davis, and obviously for those two to consider how they want to deliver that commitment to that scrutiny committee. So the recommendations I'd like to make on top of that nomination would be as highlighted there under recommendations, and that we consider the report and appendices and recommend to Council the establishment of a joint overview and scrutiny committee for the region, to recommend to Council to appoint a non-executive member to represent the Council on the Cardiff Capital Region Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, taking into consideration paragraph 2.3 of Appendix A, and to recommend to Council to appoint a deputy non-executive member to attend meetings in the absence of the appointed member. So just to recap, my nomination would be for Paul Pavia, supported in his absence by Alan Davis. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Howard.
Can I second that nomination, please,
Yeah,
Chairman?
thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Councillor Blakeborough.
Thanks, Chair. Just one or two questions. The Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, one of the purpose of that is to enable members to be kept up to date, and I just wondered what process is going to be in place to make sure everybody is kept in the loop on that. In terms of the nominations, I fully support those nominations. Paul and Alan are on economy and development, and I do think they have the passion, the vigour and the energy to keep on top of things and question with integrity and confidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. And you're quite right. It is absolutely important that the whole council's kept in the loop. Obviously, I'll be bringing periodical reports on progress on City Deal to council as we've done in the past. But I think with the Economy and Development Select Committee already taking a strong overview of City Deal, I'm sure they will also be wanting to feed back to us, and supplemented by the information they're going to receive, those members who will be on the new joint overview and scrutiny committee. That all of that shared knowledge needs to come forward. I think it'd be sensible to perhaps have a discussion about how we best keep you briefed, and how regular briefings you need from me as leader and from the select committee or its reps on the overview and scrutiny committee. I think that's a little conversation we have, but I think we need to have, but I think we're all agreed that everybody needs to be in the loop.
Councillor Petroni?
Yes, to endorse the nominations, Chair. I know both councillors are really good councillors. And for me personally, given the gravity of the City Deal and its scope of ambition, having two councillors, for want of a better word, who aren't drones, is really critical for the success and for the scrutiny of some of these projects. And I know both councillors won't get caught up in some of the rhetoric and some councillors have a tendency to do so. I don't believe these two councillors will. So I endorse the nomination. I would just want to ask a slightly similar question, but more detail, similar to Councillor Blakeborough, on Appendix B2, draft terms of reference for the joint overview. Yes, I'm sad enough to read it. On item, just under item 15, functions to be exercised by a joint scrutiny committee, it says on E, to make any reports or recommendations to the regional cabinet and or to any of the appointing authorities and to any of their executives. And it's just sort of unclear, that process. Who determines whether it goes to the executive, to the regional cabinet alone, or to the authority in general? Who makes that decision? And I would advocate that if the scrutiny committee felt so strongly that it needed to make recommendations, all reports, that it should go to the full council, especially this full council. And so we should be aware of the scrutiny committee's concerns. That's my position on the matter. I wonder what the leader and the other groups think.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fox?
Sorry, I couldn't pick up exactly the number the letter you read out, just to read exactly what it said. But for just picking up what I thought you you said, for me it would seem that if a council or a particular executive were concerned around an area that might be happening within the City Deal, they'd be at liberty to ask the joint overview committee to feed back to that council, to that cabinet, and I think that would be absolutely right. So if this council felt there was, sorry?
It was about who decides which level it goes at.
Well, Paul probably have a view about that because he may have been discussing it with Chief Exec, but I would have thought that the scrutiny committee should be autonomous, and if it decides it's going to make a decision, it should be able to do it. But Paul, you've probably had deeper conversation than I have on that.
I can give you a more technical answer, which is that this council, along with the other 9 sovereign councils, agreed a joint working agreement. That joint working agreement specified the powers and the delegations that you were prepared to pass to the joint cabinet. That limits their authority and their action. So the scrutiny committee should be guided by that. So that will give a good indication for whomever in terms of whether something needs to go to joint cabinet or indeed here. Having said that, The joint working agreement does not deny any member of this council or any member of any other council the right to bring a motion to their home authority if they have a concern that they believe needs to be aired. So you have a technical agreement which you've signed up to along with everybody else, but you also have the freedom to act as you always have had on any other matter. But the committee itself would be guided by the JWA, the Joint Working Agreement.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Tony Eason.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hear me, as a matter of protocol for the process, 2.3 says that the deputy executive member to attend meetings in the absence, fine. Would it be appropriate, Councillor Fox, that the deputy member attend as an observer for continuity? Because unless there's continuity, the second person would not probably fall into place. And also, further on down in the options appraisal, there's opportunity for this council to carry out scrutiny, and also that the Economic Development Committee retain responsibility to scrutinise the impact of the deal itself. Really, the question is, would the deputy member be allowed to attend as an observer and non-voting?
Sorry, it's me again. All meetings of the city deal are open, as indeed ours are, unless there is a good reason for them not to be so. So Councillor Davis, or indeed any other member of the public, anywhere in the world actually, can pop along and observe any meeting at any point in time. So I hope that would satisfy your concern, Councillor Eason.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Francis Taylor.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely happy with the nominations, and just wanting to check that it would be really helpful if we could also perhaps apply the desire to have members with the appropriate skill mix to represent this authority at all other outside bodies. And I'd really be interested, if we were going to genuinely pursue that we did a little audit of what skills are needed. That's a serious point, but I think just as you made that point, Peter, it's probably worth reflecting that at some point. I've heard some of the answer to one of the questions I was going to ask, but further than that, one question I wanted to clarify really. In terms of the route that comes back, the information from the scrutiny committee or from the city deal per se. So, for example, I note a reference to, in the Public Service Board minutes, to the public service test bed and some of the emerging themes. I appreciate that we're going to get occasional reports on those matters, but I think it would be really helpful, without having to pursue it proactively, to understand how we might get that information and how we might debate it and discuss it here in this authority. So not just the issues that the scrutiny committee has decided they want to make reports on or are concerned about, but how we feed into those wider discussions. I note things like dementia, diabetes are coming up, and I'm just interested what that route is. I appreciate we've got representation at the regional cabinet, but how do we, in a democratic sense, also own some of those wider discussions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fox.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. On your first point, I would like to hope that all of our members in this chamber, if they're appointed to a committee, will do their very best for this committee, and if they haven't got the skills, they will be learning on the job. So I hope that that is the case. Yes. Now, some of you may not have found it yet, but the Cardiff Capital Region does have a website. It does have all of its papers on there. They are all open. You can access those papers, and I would have thought if you had a concern, you could feed into our members of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, or you will be playing it back to your own Scrutiny Committee, who will have periodic reports and items on its agenda, I'd have thought, on the city deal. I know it's something I know that the chair is quite passionate about, so I'm sure he will be following that. So I would encourage you, really, Francis, to go via the website at the moment. I don't know if Chief Executive got a better idea than that. Please shout up.
That's certainly there as a mechanism. We could, I'm sure, find a way of making those papers more easily accessible to you by probably linking it into our hub, which I think more of you tend to go to. We can certainly develop that. Your second point was about democratising the process, I think. And there are examples, I think, of how that's starting to work through. So if I give you one as an exemplar, we are now members with the other 9 councils of a regional transport authority. Our representative on that regional transport authority is Councillor Brian Jones, who holds the transportation brief. I know Councillor Jones takes places great story in our strategic transport group here. So there is a straight linear line, I guess, that we can develop over time, which enables Councillor Jones to take perspectives from others as he goes forward in that work. That will soon develop in a planning environment. That will soon develop in a skills environment. We're blessed in South East Wales with over 500 county and county borough councillors. But it is a great question, how we make sure, we collectively, how all councillors feel that they can make a contribution to the city deal on an ongoing basis, I think is something that the incoming programme director / chief executive can give great thought to in her early days. We also have another good point of contact.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Armand Watts.
Yeah, I think that the 2 representatives we have on the committee, which I sit on, I do have the skills and skill sets and do have the teeth actually to give it proper scrutiny. We've seen recently in economy development, we're prepared to knock things back if we think things are not being done correctly. And I think that's a good thing. My only concern is whether or not Alan is I guess in a position where he's indefinitely going to be really the bridesmaid as opposed to the bride when it comes to then sitting on this committee, because it seems then that Paul, because of the political balance, he is obviously there for the Conservatives' representation on economy and development, that Alan won't get a chance to actually lead on this. And I understand there's a counter argument for continuity, but you could say the same for all the committees, and we know where that gets us. So, what I guess my point is, will we have an option where we can swap over, or at least Alan has the opportunity to become the lead on this for scrutiny, in the name of democratisation, as the Chief Executive said? Thank you.
Councillor Fox.
Well, one thing, Armand, you will know that there should not be any political emphasis within scrutiny and overview functions. There clearly isn't in this council. That isn't the case. I think what's been laid out there, which we're looking to agree, is that there is a named member supported as a substitute by an additional member, which in this case is Alan. I know Paul and Alan have worked very closely together, and I'm sure there will be times where Paul will feel Alan's strengths are so that it might be useful for Alan to attend the meeting. But for the purposes of this report, Paul will be my nomination is for Paul to be the named member, supported by Alan in his absence.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Simon Howarth.
Thank you, Chair. This is old hat. We've been here before. Project worth hundreds of millions of pounds. The incinerator down in Cardiff. We had a member representation down there. It worked really well. I don't know why we're actually progressing on the issue of representation here. Just get on with it. My only criticism, I would say, with the report is we're relying on our scrutiny officer to be in attendance there. If it does get busy, I don't want this authority to be suffering reference to the other side of it as well. That will be really difficult. I think when we did Project Worth, we had, I think we may have had two scrutiny officers here at the time. I will be looking at if our officer is not attendance, that the 2 members there can make sure they report back to the officer on their findings. I don't know, will the meetings be recorded, etc., because it will get nitty-gritty. There's no doubt about that. I turn large sums of money here, and I do hope they do the job well in actually scrutinising the board there, and the Welsh Government as well, also, because they'll become under scrutiny as well. But I just need clarification from the leader whether we will have enough support the legal side of it. Who will support the legal side on that as well? Because they'll need a legal representation sitting in there as well for guidance. Because we had that with the Project Worth. So I think we should just have a little bit more thought. Perhaps when we're pulling this together, we've got the report here. There may be the odd amendment that we have to bring forward, but it is important that we do it correctly and properly, and it did get nitty-gritty with Project Green. So time will be in essence, but good luck everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Howard.
Thanks, Simon. I share your concern about, we have limited scrutiny support here. Hazel does a wonderful job. There's only one of her. Hence, in 3.2, you'll see that the Cabinet, the Joint Cabinet, agreed that Bridgend County Borough Council would undertake the role of host authority and would provide all the necessary scrutiny support to that function. It'll be recharging the city deal for that overhead. I know, but around the deal, around the region, there are various authorities have different roles. So they will in turn to take that supportive role, as we have likes of Cardiff, who are the accountable body for the legal types of advice and other sort of administrative things. We have the Vale of Glamorgan, for instance, who are leading forward on strategic planning. There are many host authorities who are picking up a role. So I think we can be rest assured, I'm hoping we can be rest assured that there won't be a drain on our own scrutiny capacity, because it will be supported and driven by Bridgend.
Did you wish to speak, Councillor Pratt?
Sorry, just to say that we're having trouble hearing in the back because there's a fan going, and if more than one person's got a mic on, there's more than one mic on, we can't hear the words. Sorry, Chair.
Is it possible that fan could be switched off? Because we had it on this morning at group and it's a pain in the butt. We'll endeavour to get the fan switched off. Nobody else has indicated they wish to speak on this particular matter. The recommendations are on page 49. Three of them. I propose that we vote on the whole three in one go. Does somebody please?
Chairman, happy to move those three on one go and then add the nominations I shared.
So Councillor Pavier be our member with Councillor Davies as his number 2. Are you happy with that? Please show that you're all happy with that. Thank you very much indeed. Right. I think we go to plastic free next, don't we? Yeah, 11.1. We're now going to item 11A, plastic free Monmouthshire. Councillor Pratt, are you going to take us through this?
Chairman, it's my understanding that the portfolio holder is going to introduce it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. There's been a huge increase in reducing the use of single-use plastics in the last few months, not least because of the shocking scenes of plastic contamination in our oceans shown on the BBC's Blue Planet series. Single-use plastics use precious fossil fuels, take hundreds of years to break down, injure wildlife on land and sea, blight the landscape as litter, block drains and cost money to buy, clear up and dispose of. This has resulted in actions being taken at local, regional and national levels by community groups, local government, supermarkets, industry, Welsh and UK governments. Many communities across the UK are working towards becoming plastic free under a scheme accredited by Surfers Against Sewage. It should be noticed the aim of such work is to reduce and eliminate the use of unnecessary single-use plastics, not all plastics, which still have an important role to play in many aspects of life. Abergavenny, Chepstow, Monmouth and Usk all now have active and enthusiastic plastic-free community groups in operation, often as an offshoot of the transition town and local litter groups. The groups report more public interest in plastic-free than any other previous transition town campaign. At this point, I'll hand this over to Jane Pratt, who's chair of Strong Community Select Committee and dealt with this report.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you very much, Chairman. These very well organised, able and enthusiastic groups that we've just mentioned asked to attend Stronger Community Select Committee on the 24th of May, where they ably presented the case for reducing single-use plastics and outlined the work they're doing in their own towns. As a result of their presentations, Strong Communities unanimously recommended that the Council agree to work towards becoming a plastic-free county through reducing single-use plastics in line with the Plastic-Free Coastline campaign, which has been run by Surfers Against Sewage. Strong Communities agreed to commit to the following steps: to make a commitment to work towards plastic-free status, to review its own use of single-use plastics and take steps to identify unnecessary plastic use and reduce this, to support voluntary and community action to reduce plastic use, undertake litter picks, etc., to work with schools, businesses and other partners to reduce plastic use, and to work with organisers of events on MCC property to reduce single-use plastics to a minimum and ensure that effective recycling for necessary plastics is in place, to participate in meetings to support and coordinate plastic-free activities across the county. This fits well with work the Council is already beginning to undertake to reduce plastic waste, and there are clear environmental, sustainability and financial reasons for reducing the use of single-use plastics in Monmouthshire, both within communities and also within the County Council. There is growing public and political pressure to take action to protect our countryside and oceans, and the Council should be leading by example. Working towards plastic-free status aligns with our corporate plan and contributes to multiple wellbeing goals under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. I would urge Council to endorse the recommendations of Strong Communities Select and agree to work towards becoming one of the first plastic-free counties in the United Kingdom. This was a community-driven initiative. It's what our residents want, and I believe we all have a duty to deliver it. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dimitri Petroni.
Thank you, Chairman. Completely support this report in every way and every recommendation. And I'm pleased that the controlling group have changed their mind. If they cast their minds back to July 2015, the Labour group then proposed banning single plastic use bottles and other items because of the effect on the environment, because it was getting in our oceans and our rivers. And we were told no by the administration 3 years ago because the selling single-use plastics produced an income and that would enable us to keep frontline services ongoing, quote. What has changed? I'm pleased you have changed your mind. It took you 3 years, but we're here. Better happening now than never. So have we got over the frontline services funding issue, Councillor Fox?
Thank you. Councillor Charles Howard.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to support the report and the efforts of the plastic-free groups in our towns. However, I recognise that saying and delivering are two different things and that the latter may be difficult and inconvenient to implement. Two things I'd like to raise. Firstly, the report notes the need for us to get our own house in order, and one matter raised by a ward resident is our reliance on single-use recycling bags and our expectation of residents to use black bags for residual rubbish, and I'd like to hear of any alternative plans for that. Secondly, although clearly related, the matter of tackling litter and indeed fly tipping needs a separate debate. I read press news, social media, and agree with comments I read on groups like Abergavenny Voice that I sign up to about the mentality of the lowlifes who think it's okay to take a trailer up the Blorenge and dump a load of hazardous trash. So whilst I appreciate the Council has been proactive in trying to trace and prosecute those responsible for fly tipping, we ought to consider how we can be proactive in stopping other littering when it happens. Consequently, if that means we have to consider third-party enforcement or other means for those who chuck their McDonald's out of the window on the way through my ward in Llanfoist, then so be it. And I'd ask the leaders to engage in debate and maybe for that to happen in this chamber at some future point. In the meantime, I look forward to seeing progress in the reduction of plastic waste, including in this chamber, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Deborah Braithborough, please.
Thanks, Chair. Before I speak, I'm just wondering, is it possible for Roger Hoggins just to give us some relevant update on the food waste contract and preferred provider? Because I think it has some say on what we're discussing today. So if I could have that before I speak, if that's okay.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carl is at the back, and correct me where I get this wrong, but we have entered into a contract for an AD contract for the disposal of our food waste. The contractor would prefer to see the food presented to them in plastic bags rather than compostable bags, which I suspect is the matter which is being considered. However, the contract allows us to require them to take it in compostable bags should we wish to do so. So we'll take the matter back to Strong Communities and ultimately back to Cabinet to look at that. If indeed it is presented in plastic bags rather than compostable bags as we use now, there's a financial benefit to the authority to do so. And the AD company would be recycling those plastic bags. However, the matter will, as I say, come back to Strong Communities for deliberation in more detail.
Thank you, Roger. Councillor Braithborough.
Thanks. Thanks for that, Roger. I mean, first of all, I welcome... Can people hear all right? All right, okay. First of all, I welcome and support this policy because you can't argue against a policy commitment to become a plastic-free county, and also support Surface Against Sewage, tackling plastic pollution, so welcome that. Now, I'm often inspired by Councillor Taylor's words of wisdom. I think she got it from Helen Pankhurst, but she says it often. And one insight in particular comes to mind: deeds, not words. Say that a lot, don't you? It is the decisions we make as a council that will measure our commitment, and not just words in the policy. So this is why I ask Roger Hoggins to explain this new contract, because we need to consider carefully the new food waste contract. Now, Roger Hoggins has explained the dilemma. There is, in essence, that we can save money up to 80k, but by saving money, we could sell out on our principles. We could argue that people could reuse plastic packaging from the stuff they buy, but in reality, they will buy plastic bags to go into their caddies. So the truth of this remains that any recycling contract that encourages the use of plastic bags instead of the environmental starch bags is contrary to common sense. Actually, it's bonkers. It's complete bonkers. This clause in the contract is not insignificant. I believe it's really critical. It's certainly counterintuitive to the principles of a recycling strategy, which we have here, and the national campaign to reduce the use of plastic bags. Now, I know we are in partnership with Blaen y Gwent and Torfaen, and I have to say I'm surprised that Torfaen, the Labour Control Council, is backing this contract, and so going against the Welsh Government Labour policy of saying no to plastic when they introduced the 5p policy. A strong policy, I think it was a fantastic policy, taking a leap forward in tackling plastic solution. I think if we take this contract on with plastic bags, I think we're taking a backward step. So back to deeds, not words. I guess, I mean, it is going to strong communities. That's brilliant to hear. This plastic-free county policy, I have to say, is worthless if it doesn't really change our thinking and our behaviour, and that includes our procurement decisions. So I guess I'm looking towards the council and the cabinet member to give their assurance that this contract will go through a robust due diligence, taking seriously this policy commitment to become a plastic-free county before signing on the dotted line and sealing the deal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Does anybody wish to respond, or shall I go on to the next speaker? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Which one of you is responsible? Brian, is it? Yep.
Yeah, I will give that undertaking that we will look very hard at this in conjunction with the select committee, and you know, we will make what we consider to be the best decision for the council.
Councillor Armand Watts.
Yes, Chair, I'm more than happy to support this. I think this is a fantastic initiative, and especially the Chepstow Group. I did point out in the week, unfortunately, to the BBC that the banner that the Chepstow Group had put up was actually made of plastic, which created some interest from media. But I guess broadly speaking, I would be concerned, and I remember Simon, I think, sat on the committee when we did the fly posting legislation, probably going back 10 years ago now, that we were concerned about the amount of fly posting, but also particularly as well the materials that were involved in that. And I just wondered if we could, maybe Brian could incorporate that, you know, all this kind of goodwill really into that legislation, because the last thing we want to do is see the local authority or other local organisations replicating effectively what Chepstow Town Council did. Incidentally, I did go out with them on Saturday. They phoned me up straight away and said, you know, what do you think you're doing? So I said, well, you know, would you like me to go out with them? I had an enjoyable afternoon. I walked down the coast and spent 2-3 hours with my children picking up plastic. So I would recommend that we all try to do our bit. And I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bell-Smith. Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm really pleased the work's being done on this, and thanks to the Select Committee and other groups who they've been working with, and our officers are working extremely hard as well. We had a seminar briefing here the other day and talking to some of our staff and seeing the good work they're making this progress, making in this area. So absolutely support these elements. I do recall the meeting back in 2015 where it was about single-use bottles, but there was some, I can't remember the rationale. It's easy to take out of context what was said, but there was probably some quite sensible reasons why at that point we couldn't support it. Probably because we, as per usual, not much information came forward. It was knee-jerk and trying to grab a headline. But you know, we all do mature and move forward, and it's great that the country collectively, the world collectively, well, perhaps not all of it, but a lot of it, is starting to recognise the issue around single-use plastic. Let's not demonise plastic completely. Otherwise, we'd all be collapsed in this chamber at the moment, because our laptops, our plastic, everything, the chairs, everything is made of plastic. Let's just make sure that we use it responsibly going forward. And I hope perhaps in the same way that, that the agricultural community recycle its single-use plastic, because we do have a lot, because it's part of the production of fodder for cattle, and it's used, and that actually gets recycled and made into plastic furniture and fence posts and notice boards and all those sorts of things, which replace timber, so that we can actually contribute to a more of a sustainable life. So actually there are ways you can use plastic in a different way. So perhaps some of the plastic bags which may be currently getting burnt through various recycling or rather waste disposal, perhaps that can be funneled into a recycling method which actually makes use of them into a product which can help people and be sustainable to some of the other against some of the other things we may be using currently. So absolutely support the recommendation here, and thanks to Jane and her committee for the work they've done on it. Let's just make progress. The other area which I did raise actually whilst I was in our caterers today, an area that our caterers need to look at is this same issue, and I know they are looking toward that. I was given reassurances today that they're moving away from their single-use stuff, the polystyrene, and will be making moves toward this agenda. And that's a very big supplier of catering for the whole of the college, throughout Coleg Gwent and I'm sure other places. So let's hope by our actions we inspire others to take action, and that's why it's great that we can get in to our schools and businesses and try to lead by example.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Chair. I reiterate Councillor Smith's comments about these plastic cups around here. I brought my glass in, I have done for a long time, and I support what we did in the strong communities. I noticed there are 5 glasses at the front, and Councillor Fox got one. Could we move at the next council meeting? We do not have them in here. Do we have glasses, please?
If you bring them along, Tony, we'll use them. All right? If you bring the glasses along, we'll use them.
It could be arranged.
Councillor Simon Howarth.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. And I think there's some valid points being made today, and I'm not going to get really et up about this on the basis of is plastic. We do need to use it. A lot of the plastic that we have in our homes, from packaging, from purchasing goods, is pre-packed. It comes from elsewhere. It has to be transported. There's all sorts of legislation, health and safety. But I think the point's been made today, we need to get our own house in order first. And I'll give you an example. Go to our leisure centres. The kids take hundreds and hundreds, the children, hundreds and hundreds of bottles out of them machines every week. Every week. Hundreds of them, because we make a lot of money from it. We have a policy in this council about healthy eating. Go in our vending machines in our leisure centres, full of chocolate. They weren't, but they've gone back. Why? Because we make money from it. And it actually balances the books. So we can be cynical, we can say what we want about other companies, i.e. I have my milk in a milk bottle. Glass. I don't buy 4-pinter or a 2-pinter. I keep buying off the local milkman. Because of that, that's one thing we can do. I was in a top supermarket in an area in Wales on Saturday, and the plastic bags were droven out of there because that supermarket will produce plastic bags for people when they do the shopping. And I mean hundreds and hundreds of plastic bags. They even had to go and ask if they got any more in stock. So certain areas of Wales need to do a lot more. We in Monmouthshire here try our best. We actually probably go over the top sometimes in what we want to do. Take an instance of how much it costs to dispose of plastic. So when we go to the MRF or wherever we go with our recyclates, the plastic will go through the system and it will go wherever it goes. It may go to incineration, it may go somewhere else. But the weight of that plastic is very little compared to food waste. So we do have to have a balance here. So example of the food waste. If we use a plastic bag, which, you know, I mean, I still got hundreds in another bag at home. If we have to use a plastic bag to do our food waste, and people will be encouraged to use it more in a plastic bag than use them, no disrespect, but them green bags. How many times has your food waste dropped on the floor when you've picked them out the caddy or whatever? It still happens. Don't beat about the bush, mate. I mean, I'm being really serious here. If it will encourage more people to recycle their food waste, so be it. I mean, I don't have an issue with that. But if it doesn't, fair enough. We shouldn't encourage it. The officers, that's their job, to have the balance right, and I trust them, they will have the balance right in what decision we come forward on that. But let's get our own house in order first before we start condoning other companies out there and other people. Waste out there, litter, I don't know what we're going to do with it. 700 kilograms removed from Puff D yesterday. 700 kilograms, that's just short of 3/4 of a tonne of rubbish dumped, and it's every week. Can we afford to keep doing this? No, we can't. So we have to do something how we're going to address to keep our countryside and our county beautiful. I'm really disappointed at the grass cutting, which you guys decided to do. We were totally opposed.
Excuse me, we're not on grass cutting, we're on plastic.
It's about, yes, but it's about keeping the countryside and our...
you're
excuse me, Chairman, you allow people to discuss McDonald's and other things. The countryside is appalling. We need to keep the countryside tidy. 2 cuts a year. Actually, when you do the one cut late in season, you find all the rubbish in there. What does it do? It makes the countryside look awful. So let's get our own house in order. We cut and cut and cut for very little. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Martin Grocott, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall that a few months ago I brought a motion before this council about reduction in fossil fuels in our pension funds, and there's very clearly a link here because plastics are derived from fossil fuels, and I think that as part of our ongoing commitment to trying to make the earth a safer place, we should fully support this motion. However, while it was good to hear a cabinet member who's responsible for this area welcoming this proposal, I was disquieted to hear one of our senior officers saying that it was proposed that we should enter into a contract that would actually see an increase in the use of single-use plastics. I think that I agree with what Councillor Blakeborough said about that and others, that it's a huge step backwards. And I can remember as a senior officer in a local authority being asked to negotiate new deals of various kinds. But before being asked to do that, being given a very clear political steer as to the nature of what I should be coming up with. And I have to conclude in that light that Mr. Hoggins or whichever responsible officer in his team had to negotiate this new deal that would see single-use plastics for our food waste has really been sold a pup. And I think it calls into question the ability of the relevant cabinet member here to actually take a lead in any positive way. I think he's put officers in a very difficult position and to an extent made this council look rather foolish.
Councillor Roger Hoggins. Sorry,
Yeah, my
okay.
apologies, Mr. Chairman. I probably didn't make it clear enough. It's an option for the authority to either to continue to use the compostable bags which we presently use, or to move towards plastic bags. So the option is there for us to take as a decision. It's not a contractual obligation to go one way or the other at the moment. Oh, the other point I should say is the contract is mentioned about signing a contract. The contract is actually in place.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, Dimitri said about his motion going back some time about us not using single-use bottles and stuff within the authority. We still do, don't we? Because those machines out there give you plastic bottles. Have you spoken to colleague Gwent about that particular thing, Pete? It was interesting where you said you were talking to their caterers who produce all this stuff, sandwiches in plastic and salads in plastic. Have you spoken to them about what their views are? Because obviously they're going to have to come on board at some stage as well and do that. And I was a little bit confused when the issue of the single-use compostable bags came into it, because I thought this was more about the bottle side of it. But having thought about it, years ago, we had those like 1p plastic bags from Tesco's and stuff, and I don't know about you guys in here, but my parents used to take a few extra home and they lined the bin with them, so they were going to be recycled in a way because they've been used twice. But that's like going back a long time. But with the caddy bags, I was quite surprised the thought of using single-use, was even an option. I thought it was a bit daft. There must be a reason behind it, but God alone knows what it was. But maybe we could go back as a halfway house of using those brown caddy bags we had, because they were guaranteed to disintegrate before you even got them out of the bag.
Always rely on you, Kevin, to bring a bit of light to the meeting. Councillor Penny Jones is next.
Chair, I think in the light of the argument, I think Councillor Murphy would like to say something.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, and I'll come back afterwards.
Thank you for chairing.
Mine's a different subject.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And for Councillor Grocot's benefit, this was not a contract that was carried out by Monmouthshire County Council on its own. It was done together as a joint committee by Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen. It was run by Blaenau Gwent. It was a proper OJU regulated procedure. Lots and lots of contractors came forward, and there was a preferred contractor with whom the joint committee has signed a contract. So to inference that it was something to do with MCC heading towards plastics is certainly not true. It's also true that it didn't become apparent that that was going to be the potential way forward until March of this year, and officers have been working on the alternatives that Roger Hoggins has been talking about. So it's certainly not the case that was influenced by Councillor Grocott.
Councillor Penny Jones.
Thank you, Chair. This is an aside, giving a positive spin on how to make members aware of how everybody can make a difference. I think everybody was talking about the amount of rubbish at the end of the A449 by the Caldra roundabout, which was spectacularly awful. And it was an embarrassment as people were coming into Wales. Everybody spoke about it, nobody did anything, until 4 people residents from Usk took it in hand. And they tried to get Newport Council to do some, contribute towards this, as it's their area, but they wouldn't. So 4 of them went one day and filled over 30 bags of rubbish and plastic, and headed by Mr. Tony Keir from Usk. Sorry, I don't know the names of the other people. And they filled it up and they left it there. Slight irony is that they put all the waste into Monmouthshire County Council bags, so everybody could see and think that they'd done it. But having said that, they then went back some time later just to clear up, because once the major overhaul had been done, it was much easier. They put it all on social media, and they have shamed, I think, the council into saying, Newport Council into saying that they will try and upkeep the area itself. But I think, you know, this does emphasise how everybody can make a difference. I'm not saying we should all wander along the motorway and pick up rubbish, but just every little bit helps. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to answer Kevin. So yes, I spoke to them today. It was opportune, obviously, with this on today, and I just wanted to get a flavour. But I know one of our waste officers, whose role it is in this educational side of thing, is already in dialogue with the college and with the principal of the college to drive that agenda forward. So I'm really pleased on that. Just while I'm on the feet, Chairman, is there any reason, if providing you have a caddy which doesn't have holes in it, you can't put your waste straight into the caddy and then tip it into your bigger caddy without any bags at all? Or what is the issue with that? I know you've got to wash it out, but, you know, that would save us a problem all over, wouldn't it?
I guess it might smell a bit after a couple of weeks, but never mind. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you to Councillor Howarth for prompting me. In my early days as Chair of Stronger Communities, I do recollect the discussion at my committee of this contract between Blaenau Gwent, Torfaen and Monmouth County Council. So it certainly was discussed at my committee, you know, about a year, well, within the last year. I'm sure Roger will recollect the discussion. I just wanted to make that point because of the comments that were made.
Thank you. Councillor Jo Watkins.
Thank you. Just to follow on from Penny's comments, Monmouthshire Liberal Democrats organised a litter pick in Chepstow in March. We organised one in Caldecott last month, and we're going to be organising one in Roggett very soon. If any other members of this chamber would like to join us, we are very happy to have Conservatives, Labour and Independents along to join in with local Lib Dems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. That is the conclusion of the people who have indicated they want us. Councillor Ruth Edwards, you have to put your hand up further.
Thank you, Chair. I've always been taught that prevention is better than the cure, whatever it might be. I'm just wondering how many fines were issued in this last 12 months or beyond for littering anyway in the county.
I wouldn't think there's anybody in this room who could answer you, Ruth, but we'll do our best. Right, everybody's now whose indicator has been heard. We have a motion in front of us on page 53 as recommendations. I propose once again that we take a vote on all of those at once. So can I have a show of hands, please, for those in agreement with the recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. We now go on to item 12, which is the corporate parenting strategy on page 67.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to present the revised corporate parenting strategy and action plan 2018 to 2021. As you are aware, responsibility for our looked after children does not sit with Children's Services alone. Oh, sorry. I thought you were stopping me. No. Okay. Every elected member and every directorate within the council has a special responsibility towards those most vulnerable of children and young people to value and respect them and keep them at the forefront of our minds exactly as if they were our own. It is a collective responsibility across services and across local authorities to safeguard and promote the life chances of looked after children. And this extends during their period of being looked after and into their lives as young adults striving towards independence. This means that all of us should know what the key issues and concerns of our looked after children are, and to ensure that the council is responding to them, ensure that parental responsibilities for looked after children are being fulfilled, identify where things need to improve and make a difference for good, consider and question the impact of council decisions on looked after children and care leavers. The strategy proposes 9 priority areas as a way of articulating its current aspirations, and these are on page 3. I'm not going to go through each one. This is a second iteration of the strategy and an overview of some of the progress that was made during the preceding period, as well as some of the barriers and challenges which there are set out in pages 10 and 11. Key differences within this revised strategy include the additional focus on care leavers, a reflection of the current campaign to increase in-house carers, and an update of the current data and information set that underpins this strategy. The Corporate Parenting Panel assists the Council to fulfil its corporate parenting responsibility. It works to the action plans set out in pages 13 to 17 and monitors progress towards its aims through the data contained within. Memberships and terms of references which are appended. This corporate parenting strategy builds upon work already undertaken to improve outcomes for our looked after children under the previous strategy. But I'd like to highlight the following. Consideration of corporate parenting responsibility is now required in all reports of the Cabinet or full Council. There is a good understanding and awareness of corporate parenting through SLT and across the local authority directorates. Actions around looked after children feature in service improvement plans other than social services and social care. The Council has evaluated initial apprenticeship programmes and has strengthened the operational leadership of this. There is a post created in Enterprise to support 16 to 18-year-olds care leavers with education, training and employment. And this is a great step forward. We have a team of dedicated and committed foster carers in Monmouthshire who have a good network of support. There is a training programme in place for foster carers, and members of the placement and supportment team are trained in attachment-based practice to help them support these carers. There is support in place for generic and kinship carers through BASE. BASE is well established and helps ensure that the emotional and psychological needs of looked after children, young people and care leavers are understood and met. Their educational outcomes and achievements are reported on a cohort basis, i.e. mainstream additional learning needs, unaccompanied asylum seekers and looked after children attending the pupil referral unit, which allows greater analysis of the educational progress of looked after children. A support worker is in place to support carers and the impact of this is being evaluated. TLCY and Enterprise continue to provide extracurriculum activities to our looked after children and young people, and the fostering project is in place to support the recruitment and retention of Monmouthshire foster carers. We've just had the foster carer fortnight, which was very successful. But I'd like to also highlight to you that our performance is in the top quartile of Wales for the number of care leavers in employment, education and training. And this is important to us all. As at February 2018, 72.73, i.e. 8 out of 11 of care leavers engaged in education, training or employment during the 12th month after they left care. In the same month, 7 out of 10, 70% of care leavers engaged in that same programme, education, training or employment during the 24th month after they left care, ensuring on the whole that they are supported well. In our work-based learning apprenticeship supports programmes, one young person is with us on engagement programme in placement in Chepstow and is shortly progressing to traineeship with Torvine Training. One young person is on an apprenticeship teaching assistant at Dewstow Primary School, and this will continue, we hope. One of our first priorities for this period is to secure increased participation and engagement with children, young people and their carers. And on next week we are planning to kickstart this with a celebration event to thank our fantastic foster carers with a tea and flowers and a certificate at Caldecott Castle. This will be followed in September, we hope, by a celebration for the looked after children in an activity day in Hillston Park. It's a reminder now that all elected members are expected to attend the introduction and induction to corporate parenting that is provided. Cabinet might want to advise over any next steps for this strategy in the future. But I would like to ask members to attend the next corporate parent training programme. The safeguarding programmes have been completed successfully, but the corporate parenting is woefully low. And it really is important that we have the information so that we know we can act as an advocate for those children. So thank you. I invite you all to endorse the policy, the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And could I just add to that we will be probably the next Cabinet meeting, or certainly the one after, and then brought to this Council a proposal to exempt our looked after children from council tax when they enter the housing chain. More as the report comes forward is being finalised at the moment, but I just wanted to make it clear that we are making that proposal, and it will be coming forward very soon.
Thank you very much. Councillor Petroni.
Thank you, Chairman, and it's good to hear that previous statement from Councillor Murphy that we totally support all moves in that direction. My question relates to, I read the strategy and then I went through it again, and I couldn't see anything around prevention. Is that deliberate? Is that covered in a different remit by a different committee? Because if you read all the documentation, it just shows that over the years, and if you look at the tables, particularly on page 8, interim care orders, page 7 and so forth, that the numbers of looked after children has inextricably grown. It's putting a lot of pressure on the authority, but also having a major impact on those children's lives. And I'm just wondering, is there not part of the remit of this strategy to prevent, where possible, where appropriate, children having to be placed in care and given orders? Because it doesn't seem to be in the strategy. I can't see the word prevention, or any sort of reference to that.
Thank you for that question. I think prevention is integral. It's integral in everything that we do. I think it's most important to recognise that prevention of further harm to the children is actually taking them into our care when we need them, when we need it. And so, there are steps aside, there are measures whereby we have Families First and etc., organisations like that, which will identify problems in the first stages. And thereafter, if things get worse, then it goes on to more higher numbers. We recognise that, but it's something that we've got to do. These high numbers are throughout every local authority, not just Monmouthshire, and there are many reasons for it. One may be that there is more publicity, more awareness, and that in itself is good. However, I do agree that we do, although it may not be actually in the strategy under the term prevention, it is an integral part of our corporate parenting that we support families who need help and young people who need help at an early stage. So I would like to, at this stage, ask if there's anything else to say about this.
Yes,
the Chief Officer.
Yeah. This
Thank you.
deals specifically with our responsibilities as corporate.
Thank you, Claire.
Just could we put reference to that in the draft strategy and make it clear that we have a key part of this is prevention?
You happy with that, Penny?
Thank you.
Councillor Armand-Watt.
Thank you, Chair. I really, this is the kind of stuff that really I find, personally very interesting. Corporate parenting, what we do, the services that we provide to our children in Monmouthshire. And it's always interesting when you compare to, say, local authorities, our neighbouring local authorities. And of course, we are in a market really where we compete with other local authorities for foster carers. I wonder whether we actually compete aggressively enough in that market, and whether or not we are paying a significant rate to compete with those other local authorities, whether it's Bristol, whether it's Gloucestershire, or whether it's Cardiff and Newport on Torvine. I find it sad, really, that we are in that specific market, but also, I guess this leads me into my question about the amount of money that we actually spend on foster agencies. I remember a few years ago we were spending kind of a huge amount of money where I kind of thought that if we invested money in our own foster carers, we could actually cut out the middleman, if you like. It's not a particularly good way of phrasing it, but it's effectively what it is. My other question is, what proportion of looked after children within the authority are actually then placed up for adoption? And then beyond that, in that process of adoption with the families, what support that those families get beyond the adoption process as they grow up into teenagers? So effectively looking at areas to do with attachment and the psychological issues and support that they should be getting from the local authority and the health board. I'd be really interested to see what we do and how we do it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
I'll answer where I can, certainly. The agencies, yes, we all agree that the agencies are much more expensive, but and really, realistically, we cannot outdo them when it comes to salaries. But we can offer help in other ways. And we have had people come back into the system stating that they feel so much more supported by everybody in Monmouthshire. So that in itself is healthy. We have also had, as I just made reference to, a foster carers fortnight, whereby we had a lot of inquiries, and it looks as though it's going to be very positive for certainly a third of those. It's always the case, of course, because people come, wanting to offer a lot of help, but, they haven't got everything, perhaps, that is necessary. So we're very pleased with the way things are going forward. Yes, it's something that we have to bear, and I'm afraid so does every other authority. We're all dealing with the problems. And yes, we must try and make the terms for our foster carers as attractive as possible. And that's one reason why we're having a celebration event next week, to make them feel more cared, more included in our strategy and in the way we go forward, so they feel part of the Monmouthshire foster caring system. In fact, their contribution at our corporate parenting panel is very important, and they feel much better for having attended and attending on a regular basis. As for your second question, I really have no idea of the numbers, but I'm sure I can get them for you. But once they go through the adoption process, on the whole, their support from the Monmouthshire or from whichever authority they're coming from comes to an end. Now, there are cases where that support will continue alongside the post-adoption continuation of support, which is always there. But that is a whole different matter and doesn't come under the auspices of foster caring. I don't know if Claire would like to add anything else to this.
Chair, if I may, sorry to be helpful, really, it was specifically to do with, I guess, children that were placed in adoption, not specifically foster children, but that could end up being adopted through fostering, which is a path that many, I accept your point that you can't, sorry, I tried to pin you down on specific numbers, but I was looking then and explain to me the path then that the families go on with those children, with the support, because, further on as they reach their teens, so on and so forth, they will probably demonstrate some, well, not in every case, but psychological issues that need some expertise and support. And I wondered what that was in Monmouthshire, what it looked like in Monmouthshire.
So, yeah,
Claire, if you'd like to
I'll come on
answer.
later. Yeah.
Yeah.
About the adoption. Yes, regarding the adoption as well, I think it's important for people to note that, of course, not all Monmouthshire children who are in foster care in Monmouthshire go to adoption in Monmouthshire. They go, all throughout the authorities, England or Scotland, wherever. We, as a member of the panel, I do know that many do not come to Monmouthshire. So the support is always there for children. It does not stop. They don't just hand it over and it stops. It is, in other guises, always there. Okay.
Thank you, Luke. Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if, as Chair of the Children and Young People Committee, I could commend this policy. Having seen many local authority policies throughout the country, I think this is one of the most forward-thinking that I've seen, and certainly reflects very good practice. Could I also commend those officers who implement it? I have spoken here and in the Select Committee many times, I think, about the performance of looked after children. In some authorities, it is little short of a disgrace when you look at the performance of such young people when they reach 16 and leave Key Stage 4, and you're looking at the percentage of those young people who reach the expected levels. In Monmouthshire in 2016-17, we were in the top quartile in Wales, nearly 30%. That I think is an example of just how difficult this young cohort is, that we're at the top in Wales and yet under 1/3 were achieving the level that they were supposed to. This year, when the Chief Officer presented a draft report to Select Committee this week, I must admit my heart sank for a time when I looked at that equivalent percentage for 2016-17, and it was 6% in Monmouthshire. But what was really very heartening was that individual officers could actually give a very clear, almost person-by-person breakdown of the 15 young people in total. And one had been predicted by their school to reach the expected level. But what was really so commendable was that the officer was able to give a complete breakdown of the education progress of all of those 15 youngsters to show that although they hadn't reached the expected level, that was in all cases, bar the one who had, because of wider learning difficulties, wider psychological difficulties, and in every case, it was really very heartening to know that this authority was tracking the progress of every one of those young people to seek to ensure that they had done the best of which they were capable. So even though they may not have reached the national standard that might be expected, they were starting from much lower starting points and had still made good practice. Another really positive example of good work is I think in the school where I'm a governor, King Henry VIII in Abergavenny, where there is actually a looked after mentor that the school has appointed for this year, and I hope the funding will enable that post to be sustained. And what was really nice was that I was involved with that appointment, as were two looked after children, and that the mentor herself had been a looked after child when she was young. Through Hazel Eilert, the scrutiny manager, I have asked King Henry to come along and actually present to Children and Young People's Committee what they have done and their practice, because I think there are lessons there for the whole of Wales and indeed probably the whole of Great Britain. And I think where we get such excellent practice within our county, we really do need to let people know about that. So I'd like to extend an invitation to all members that, assuming King Henry can accept that invitation, that members might like to come along and hear some really excellent practice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ruth Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, things have moved on in leaps and bounds over this last so many years, because I suppose most of you know in here that I've got an adopted daughter. She is now 27 years of age, married with a child, and she was fostered for 2 years. She was 6 months old when she came into our family. 6 months old, and then we adopted her at 2 years of age. We had no support whatsoever once we went to court and adopted her. Nobody inquired or anything. But I think the most important thing is to also recognise that they don't all come from, I suppose you would think, low-income families. They can come into fostering from all walks of life, from all stages of our society, that the main thing they need is a stable, loving home. And I think they will all thrive if they can hope for that, which they could not have perhaps of where their birth family were. Megan was adopted simply, she was put on the register at birth because she was on the at-risk register. And yes, you have your ups and downs and you can have challenges, but you can have those also with your own children. And I just hope that we've managed to have one child on a good path in life, but it is challenging, and I'm sorry to see that we're having more and more looked after children in the authority. But we can all do our best for those children's future, and I don't think we can expect more of anybody.
Thank you, Ruth. Councillor Blateborough.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this report. I don't know who wrote it. Was it Jane Rogers or was it you, Claire? Jane Rogers, yeah. I have to say, Jane Rogers' reports are, if you like, a joy to read. They're open, candid reports. They celebrate all the successes, but actually they also highlight the issues and challenges ahead that we need to be aware of. So credit to Jane for that. I've got 4 questions that maybe Claire might be able to help with. But to be honest, Councillor Jones is really on top of this stuff, so she'll probably be able to answer it herself. And one specific question for Councillor Jones. The strategy sets around 9 priority areas. So priority 3, looked after children enjoy a range of educational and learning opportunities. So the question around that is how many have needed to change schools as a result of a placement? Because we know about the negative impact of changing schools in terms of change of routine, losing friends, teachers, and lack of continuity in their learning. So that's the first question. The second question is around priority 8. And that reads, looked after children are cared for by Monmouthshire carers and remain close to their homes and communities. Now, also I'm aware that the report is highlighted that we don't have sufficient Monmouthshire carers, and we do over-rely on independent foster agencies. I know there's been a recent campaign to raise awareness and to get more people to come forward, and I think that has been a success, but that's just a start. So the question around that then is how many have been, if you like, displaced from their communities or areas they are familiar with as a result of a placement. So 2 sort of questions around that. We've already discussed that the number of children in care has risen right across Wales and certainly significantly in Monmouthshire. And the question here then is how has the settlement from Welsh Government reflected this increase in need? On page 7, and Councillor Jones was talking about care leavers and what they've achieved first 12 months and then 24 months. Obviously, percentages, numbers, I'm not that interested in. We are dealing with individuals with hopes and dreams, and it's about their story I'm interested in. But looking at these stats, 8 out of 11 care leavers in education, training and employment during the first 12 months, and then the second 24 months, you're looking at 7 out of 10 have been involved in this programme. I guess I'm interested in the story of the 3 care leavers for each period. I'd like to know how they've missed out on the good news and what's happening with them. Obviously not massive details because it's confidential, but it's those who aren't in the good story figures. I'd like to know what's happened with them and if there was anything we could have done to include them. The final question, I guess, comes to Councillor Penny-Jones. In the report, it is suggested that the litmus test question when we're looking at our services, would it be good enough for my child? Now, Councillor Penny-Jones has signed this report. She's heavily involved in this. And so my question is, would it be good enough for your grandchildren? Finally, just for it to be reported, monitored, written up, at the moment I'm on the panel, membership panel. In future it will be a job share with Councillor Francis Taylor and myself, and we'll share that role. Thank you, Chair.
Want to come in first? Or?
Sorry to read some of this. In the last year we had 9
Sorry, just a quick clarification. Can the public hear the response to Debbie
public
Blake?
hear the response? Yes, I
Can
think
they
so.
hear her response on the when they
Yes.
they can?
Yes.
No, they can't.
Go and ask Linda, she'll know, she's watching it.
Yeah. Anyway, Councillor Francis Taylor, I'll try and clarify that.
Penny hasn't answered.
Sorry, Betty, go. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to answer Councillor Blakebury's question about the litmus test. Well, first of all, nothing is good enough for my grandson, so that would fail everything. But yes, I give a great deal of thought to everything. I and the team and the corporate parenting panel. I think at the moment is probably one of the closest it's ever been. You commend Jane Rogers quite rightly on this strategy, Councillor Blakebury, but and in fact she wrote several drafts and she brought them back to the panel each time, so it was discussed by everybody, including foster carers. So everybody had an input into it, and I think that's the way to go about it, and that's why it's so successful. So yes, I have we all think about the children a great deal, and really their welfare is our concern. And I think that's why it's so important that everybody has knowledge of corporate parenting and why it's there. Can I just add, Chair, whilst I'm here, prevention. I completely forgot to give you an example, Councillor Dimitri. Sorry. and Dimitri, because, yeah, just go on, Benny. There are contact centres as well, which are excellent, and they're worth a visit. I mean, obviously, prior arrangement. There's one in Caldicott, which I've been to, and one at King Henry VIII, which is listening to Councillor Grucott. I was reminded of this, and they are excellent facilities which are there to look after and to help and support families who are having difficulties, and that in itself is a prevention aid. It can do a great deal of good. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, Francis Taylor, it's your turn.
I'm sorry, I keep telling you that when you've not switched your thing
I can't stop looking
off.
at you, it's all right.
I don't know how to take that, Chair, but I was trying to motion to you. I was trying to tell you that your microphone is on. But yes, I am blushing, but anyway. Okay. Chair, just a couple of questions really for the Cabinet Member. First of all, to say that I've never sat on the corporate parenting panel, but I ended up going to several meetings because the issue of some of the experiences of our looked after children exercised me greatly, and in particular the access to placements and some of the wider issues. So as Councillor Blakeborough says, I'm going to share with her, and we hope to make a contribution to this really important role. I'm heartened to hear that there are improvements, because I think the measure of this authority is how it treats its most vulnerable residents and members of its community, and it's absolutely clear that our looked after children are clearly fall into one of those categories. A couple of questions. The first one, Councillor Jones, is a little while ago we had 2 apprentices. They were looked after themselves, and so could offer enormous empathy to our looked after children. And that was a fairly short-term arrangement, and the last I recall was there was not clarity about whether those posts would be continued. In fact, there was a concern in the social care department that they had the capacity to manage those apprenticeships. That concerned me greatly, because I felt if we had started off offering apprenticeships to looked after children as a measure of our commitment, confidence and desire to support their development, that it just wasn't good enough to say we don't know what's going to happen with this. So I'd really like a concrete answer to that, because the desire or the ask from the corporate parenting panel at the time was that this should be both evaluated, and also we should put proper support arrangements in place for those young people undertaking that role. I don't know where that is, and I'd like a really clear answer, if I can, please. The second thing is the issue of the life story, and I think this really gets to the heart as well of Councillor Blakeborough's question to you, Councillor Jones, which is it good enough for my grandchildren? Well, I can tell you that the fact that that one of the issues raised by the foster carers was that so many, and I can't remember the percentages, but it was enormous, of our children will have nothing about their life story recorded. So they won't have photographs, they won't have a story. I don't think that's good enough for anybody. I'd really like to know what where we are with that. There were some technical issues, there were some capacity issues, but is it good enough for any child to have no record of where they came from, no photographs? I don't think so. So I'd really like to know where we are on that. Councillor Murphy, so this is a question of Councillor Murphy, mentioned that we were going to bring forward a proposal to disregard council tax for our looked after children. I recall recently talking to some of the social work team. At one time, we used to give our looked after children and care leavers access to leisure centres for free. So, you'll see one of our priorities is to maintain the health of our looked after children. I don't know if that has ever been resolved, but it'd really be helpful to have an answer because, you know, we're corporate parents and we would want to provide what's good enough for our children. So I'd like to know where we are with that. Looking at the action plan, many of the progress measures are output focused rather than outcome focused. I'd really like to see something a bit more helpful, which gives us some more qualitative data, as far as it can be given. That's a comment and an ask. And then finally, there are no timelines attached to the action plan, and I don't think that's very helpful. Given the progress is very slow in this area, I think, I'd like to see really clear timelines for when we can expect to see some of those outcomes and outputs. Thank you, Chair.
Right,
Thank you, Francis. Penny?
Right, thank you, Councillor Taylor. I'd like a discussion with you, in fact, because I really don't know where you've got some of this information from. I'd like to know when you last really attended a series of corporate parenting panels, since it's been upgraded and since we've changed the format somewhat. I really don't. We have a specific role, an officer in a role to look after young people in apprenticeship support and post-education support. So that's a new post. So I really, feel that perhaps you haven't been kept up to date with that information. I suggest that you contact her or I put you in touch with her. But apprenticeship support is very important. I read out 2 examples of apprenticeships locally. I don't know about the other ones that you're talking about, and I think really we ought to keep, talk about it privately afterwards, perhaps, because we don't want them identified. But I really don't know. If you're talking about apprenticeships in Monmouthshire County Council per se, actually in the council, then yes, I agree we need more encouragement. But Hannah Jones is quite capable and does put people where she thinks they are best suited. So that is one aspect. I think we ought to continue. The other is the life story. Every child that goes for adoption from foster carers has to have a life story. That adoption does not go through the panel unless a life story has been agreed and we have seen evidence of it. So I'm afraid that is not true, that from foster caring to adoption, every child has. No, they don't all have photographs, and do you know why? Because those parents, the natural parents, often won't supply one. And you can't take people's photographs without their permission. So it is a very sad thing if they don't supply it, but that is the way it is. Not all of them are like that. And likewise, siblings are kept in the life story as well, and half siblings. So it's something that we spend a lot of time doing. And I really feel that it's an integral part of what foster carers should be about. What did you, outcome focused, I took that on board, and timelines. And the other one, leisure centres. Leisure centres, oh yes, leisure centres.
We still do.
Yes, we still, yeah, we do. We still offer free entry into leisure centres and other Pacific areas. So all in all, I feel that it's a very positive way forward. I don't know if Claire would like to add anything else to this.
There will be a specific answer around the apprenticeships that we've had.
Yeah.
And how,
Sorry, Chair. By way of personal explanation, I wasn't referring generally to apprenticeships. I was referring to the ones we had in the authority. And I wasn't referring to when children go for adoption. I was referring generally, and it would be really helpful, I think, for Council to see where we are with the My Life recording of those children's lives, because I think it is a measure of, you know, how important that life story is. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Paul Pavier, you're next.
Chair, before Councillor Pavia comes in, Claire, could you come down here, please? If there are more questions, we can capture your responses more adequately, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Can I welcome the corporate parent plan? Just for one short question. Given we're moving very slowly to a post-Brexit world, do we have any looked after children that are non-British citizens who require settlement status?
We have a number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. In that number, I think it's 4. Probably come back on the exact detail, but there's 4 unaccompanied.
All right. Councillor Alan Davis, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to follow up on what Councillor Grucott said. I'm not an expert in this field, but he certainly is, and I think you've got an excellent strategy and excellent performance, and long may it continue. But I think I haven't got a question directly related to the strategy, because I think it's very good, but the concerning thing is the trend on the young people that we have in after. And I think it demonstrates how important the well-being and future generations act is, and how delivering on, you know, the noble aspirations within that, how important it is. The trend is going upwards and upwards, and I suppose my question really to the cabinet member and the officers is, where do you see that trend going for the foreseeable future, and what are the implications for the authority in terms of what it needs to provide and the resources that we have? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I don't know. I have a feeling, and I think we all feel the same, that the trend is going to continue much as it is, and it's unfortunate. Of course, the cost implications are quite severe. So it's something that we have to work towards, and as you mentioned, prevention, etc. We will work, you know, put more and more resources into that area, and that's all we can do really, alongside training and more staff. Thank you. Claire, do you want?
To reflect, I mean, if you look at our figures and the trend over the last 5 years, there's both that significant increase in terms of looked after children. There's also that significant increase in terms of number of children on the Child Protection Register. There's always devil in detail. So what we're seeing at the moment is that in terms of looked after children, there are far more children on what we call placement orders who live and are placed with their own parents and cared for by kinship carers, so members of the extended family. Our numbers around foster children in foster care, independent fostering agency and in-house are remaining relatively stable, as are the numbers of children who are in residential placements. That workload around children being placed with parents and kinship carers is very complex in its own right. So we're constantly reviewing the skill mix within our Children's Services Department, the range of service offers to enable us to effectively support those children and families, as well as the children and families who are in perhaps the more traditional parts of the looked after system. In terms of complexity and needs of children and young people coming through, that's increasing. The level of support that we need and the partnerships that we need to work with in terms of our health colleagues, around mental health services, around our education colleagues and the challenges into schools means that partnership approach around the needs of these children and young people is particularly urgent really and needed on a daily basis operationally and strategically. And then, you know, sort of final point in terms of that preventative offer, it's making sure that we get in a timely way. Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, the Social Services and Wellbeing Act around the individuals all push us to intervene earlier, to support at an earlier sign of neglect, not waiting for needs to escalate and come into and require statutory social services intervention. And one of the earlier sort of answers that I gave talked about the whole remodelling this being about early help in Monmouthshire in the last year or so, which needs to deliver in terms of managing risk and risky situations sooner and preventing that escalation up to the front door of children's services.
Thank you very much. Now, is there somebody before you? Councillor David Dovey, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In actual fact, Alan asked the question I was about to ask, so I won't. I'm not going to build on that. He did it more adequately than perhaps I could have. But one thought has gone through my mind while we've been here today: the logistics of the officer trying to make a contribution to the debate from the gallery at the back. This happens in this chamber quite often. In planning, we've known it's happened, and on a number of other occasions. Might it be possible that there is a facility in the back for an officer to make a contribution from there if there isn't room elsewhere here? It would save them coming around and trying to take up a place at the rostrum, and it would make the debate roll on, and we wouldn't have our own body of people here not being able to hear at the back as well. It's just a way of making it work better for us. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
David, our Chief Executive is going to take that in hand. Okay. Councillor Judah Thomas, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One thing I'd like to say, I've been on the corporate parenting panel for a year, and I've learned a huge amount. I've been involved in education for probably 40 years in between teaching and working for an exam board and being a parent myself. And at the end of the day, obviously, it isn't quite the same as being in raising a child yourself, being in the home. There is bound to be an element of disruption. But the one thing that I would say that's come out clearly in my time on the corporate parenting panel is the commitment of the full-time paid staff and of the committee. And at the end of the day, we have discussed issues and we have thought seriously about all of the issues that affect looked after children. And in my opinion, it is the most important committee that this authority runs. It has a huge effect on people's lives in the future. It will have a huge effect if it is not conducted properly, and if there aren't good policies, which now there appear to be, then those youngsters who are in care will go on probably to have families, and perhaps their children might experience the same sort of disruption. So it's crucially crucially important in terms of the Future Wellbeing Act. But apart from that, purely in terms of humanity, and in these days of austerity, whatever else goes, then I think we need to fund and maintain the Looked After Children panel, the service, the offices. It will increase, undoubtedly, but at the end of the day, we can't throw our hands up and say, well, we're going to spend it on plastic bags. Children are more important, in my opinion.
Thank you, everybody. We've had a long discussion about that. I'm now going to put it to the vote. On page 67, it's recommended the 3 dot points there. And is everybody in favour of those points, please? Please show. Okay, thank you very much. We now go on to notices of motion, and actually, Mr. Thomas, it's your first one.
Yes,
do you wish to repeat it, or are we going to take it as read?
No, I'll take it as read, please. This is an issue that is very close to my heart. Abergavenny Just Food Group is a community group made up of a wide range of people with an interest and or experience in this area. And their document highlights the injustice of the current food system in Wales. And it raises very, very serious issues. The growing number of families who cannot afford sufficient food for themselves
and their children and have to go to food banks. Undernourished households alongside high rates of obesity in children and adults. People having to buy cheaper, probably more fattening and unhealthy foods. 50% of children not eating fruit and vegetables every day, which I find appalling. Very high levels of food waste, something like 400,000 tonnes of food wasted in Wales annually. And on the other hand, poor rewards for producers. Farmers receive only 8% of the added value in the system, and their workers, some of them often migrants, receive very, very low wages in comparison with industrial wages. Environmental damage, such as soil erosion and loss of biodiversity due to the overuse of fertilisers and nitrogen, etc., just to boost production. We've also got the issue of Brexit, whenever that will be decided, which poses both threats and obviously possibilities. Things might actually improve, but they might also decline. In the Just Food's sort of 13-point manifesto for food justice, it includes things like tackling food poverty and improving the diet of all, with an emphasis on local production for local consumption, including much more horticulture. And this would have a real impact on health and well-being, as obviously set out in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. As you can see, this Just Food policy would have wide-ranging benefits, from helping those in poverty, which is important, right along to better animal welfare and reduced food miles, which obviously pollutes the environment. It would involve educating both young and old and enabling them to eat a much healthier and certainly a more sustainable diet. I make a very strong plea that MCC adopts this policy and starts this very important process in a county which is renowned for food production, but most of which is travelled by road to other areas, often hundreds of miles away. If you look at Raglan Market, some of those animals are being travelled all the way up to Leeds. Having spent 7 or 8 hours in a market stall, they're then loaded onto a lorry and then trucked up to Leeds, which seems a great shame in my opinion. I would also ask that if this authority adopts this policy, that we send a copy to the Welsh Local Government Association and Welsh Government as well. I commend this motion to all members.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, is this seconded? Yes, thank you. All right, Councillor Phil Murphy, please.
I just to say, I think Penny's going to come forward on this. Can I just apologise on behalf of the leader who's been unfortunately called away on a family matter. I'll leave it to Penny to introduce, and then I'll probably come back in.
Jones.
Thank you. Well, it's me again, but I won't be answering questions on this. So, Councillor Sarah Jones has had to leave, so I'm going to speak. She's written the report, and I'm just going to read it. County Councillor Sarah Jones wants to thank Councillor Thomas for bringing forward this motion and highlighting the important issues around food injustice. It is an issue which we're keen to hear the thoughts of others on in terms of what we collectively do as society and as decision makers and to address. Sarah was sorry she could not attend the manifesto launch by the Just Food group due to another commitment, but Councillor Greenland attended for the Cabinet and gave a glowing report of the work of the group and the commitment to of their work towards ending food injustice. So in terms of the motion itself, it would be fair to say that Sarah is fully supportive of the manifesto and would welcome the opportunity to recommend it to WLGA and WG. It is also something she will refer to when meeting other groups and attending stakeholder sessions. There is a growing momentum around this agenda right now, and national groups like Wales Food Poverty Alliance are a good place to start. She will certainly support the principle behind the aims and aspirations set out in the manifesto, as members will know these go right to the heart of the social justice strategy approved by Cabinet last month. Members might find it helpful to hear of some of the work we are progressing in this area as a council that demonstrates our ongoing commitment to supporting many of the strands of the manifesto document. Monmouthshire County Council have committed to develop a food strategy. Officers are currently working with external partners to design a framework from which the strategy will develop. The goal of the strategy will be to optimise the systems, processes, training and knowledge that connect food, well-being, enterprise development and resilience. It is important that we lead by example when calling others to action. There will be a phased approach designed and delivered in collaboration with local food groups and building on the success of agri-urban and other projects. The work being undertaken in developing the strategy will equally contribute to our RDP activity, where the goal will be to research and demonstrate the impact that maximising the value the food system can have in helping people, communities and businesses to thrive. The social justice strategy has specific objectives around tackling poverty plan. Clearly there is strong read across this, and Sarah will ask that the group engages widely with Abergavenny Just Food and others, as they already do, to ensure food is a major feature. Just to finalise, there is so much we could focus on here, particularly around our own role in shortening the supply chain as a key part of developing sustainable diets and contributing to tackling climate change. She is also really keen to look at how we support younger people into food production and especially horticulture. Finally, the Social Justice Advisory Group meets next week, and they will look at the work plan, and members may wish to consider this as an area of work. So in summary, Sarah welcomes the manifesto and applauds the Just Food Group on the work they are doing in this area and looks forward to supporting the motion.
Thank you. Yeah. Did you want to come back on that before I take Councillor Grocott?
I'm very heartened to hear that, and I'm sure the Just Food Group will be very heartened, because they have worked extremely hard to put this policy together. And it is, in my opinion, a workable policy in the future. Certainly at the Just Food launch, and I know Councillor Bob Greenhill was there and was very impressed with the manifesto, but there is an urgent need to help young people to go into horticulture and to agriculture, and for people who perhaps live in flats or houses with very small gardens to have more allotments or to have parcels of land released to allow for basic horticulture. And it's certainly an educational sort of drive as well as anything else. But I'm certainly heartened by the response from County Councillor Sarah Jones.
Thank you. Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Chair. In seconding this motion, I too would like to pay a warm tribute to the response of the Cabinet member, but also to make members aware that at the launch, Councillor Thomas and myself were there, as was the Deputy Leader of the Council and Councillor Sheila Woodhouse. It is not in any sense a party political issue. And I think all four of us who were at the launch were really very, very impressed by the manifesto. We often talk very positively about the rurality of Monmouthshire. And I think this is one very positive example of where we can actually put that into some sort of practice and give a lead to those other parts of Wales that are not as rural as we are, because there are lessons to be learnt right across Wales. But I think this is an excellent example when Monmouthshire can really grasp this manifesto and give a very positive example to the rest of the country.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just for clarity, could I ask how many members have actually seen this manifesto? A reasonable number, but there's an awful lot of people being asked to vote on something that they haven't seen, which concerns me somewhat. I mean, in broad principle, happy with it. I managed to get hold of a copy today, so it looks a little bit generic, but there's certainly nothing in there that you would want to argue with. But as I say, I was concerned that with the motion on the agenda didn't come the manifesto that we were being asked to consider, and I would look forward to a report from the officers, as the motion says, just to clarify just what the authority is doing.
Councillor Pratt.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Whilst I broadly support this, I would agree that we really need more time to discuss it. My background is in hotel and catering, and I was a regional manager for a freezer company years ago. And I think this comment that's made here, everyone is supported and encouraged to cook from scratch, grow their own and eat more fresh, seasonal, local, organically grown food. I would totally agree with that, but what a massive task we've got. And it's going to have to start with educating people, because I've got 3 children in their 20s and I'm appalled at their diets. I think my daughter spends more time getting pizza in Pizza Hut with a £5 voucher than she does actually cooking for herself. So I don't think we can underestimate the size of this task. You've only got to look at the supermarket and the shelves are full of ready meals. It really is going to be a culture change, and it's got to be driven by government, both in Wales and in Westminster, because the supermarkets have all the food that you really need round the outside, like all the fresh veg and fruit, and the middle of the supermarket where people walk is full of all this ready-made food that is not good for us. So I really think it's a great initiative, but it is going to be a massive culture change, and it's going to need huge support from government to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watts.
Yeah, I'm happy to support it. I mean, some of the responsibility clearly lies with supermarkets and their responsibility to the communities that they're supposed to serve. But I guess it's the kind of corporate sale of food that isn't actually food. This stuff that presents itself as food, but is not really kind of edible food. It's a kind of synthetic junk food that we eat. I find myself, admittedly doing, and you can tell, Anne, I know you're looking at me, I put on a bit of weight, and it's probably because of that. But beyond that, I think, for example, and I can only do one meal, which involves pasta and pesto. If you go to the supermarket now, most supermarkets, if you buy pesto, because I can't make it myself, it doesn't actually have olive oil in it. Can you imagine that? And they're passing that off. So it's a continual cycle of nonsense and lies that the consumer gets. And I try and make light of it, but it's true. It's the myth that you're actually buying something that is healthy, that is nutritional, that is effectively going to be value to you and your family. It's disingenuous, and we have to kind of tackle that, and push back at that when we look at supermarkets coming into the area. We have to have those conversations with them, Chair.
Thank you. That's come to the end of questions. Mr. Councillor Thomas, you've obviously been well received, and you've heard that it's going to go forward from here. We look forward to the outcome.
You need to vote.
I need to take a vote that you're all happy with that motion. Okay. And the second motion of the afternoon is from Councillor Petruni.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Before I push the motion, can I seek your permission to alter the motion, relying on the Constitution, Section G, paragraph 14.7 of the Constitution, where I'm allowed alteration which is in sympathy with the original motion.
As you pre-warned me, you have my okay on that.
Chairman, just to be accurate and follow the Constitution, the meeting needs to give its consent to allow that alteration of Councillor Petruni.
Can you all
show your hands, please?
Show your hands, please. Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. And may I ask, after I've explained the new motion or read it out, that if I could ask the Chief Executive to see if officers are able to deliver on what I've sort of requested. So the new motion states there seems to be common ground across the chamber that we need to do more to make sure that people across Monmouthshire have the opportunity and can have the opportunity and can afford to live in this beautiful place that we live in. It's undeniable that we have a supply side issue in the housing market and that we are seeing price spikes, and this is likely to continue for the foreseeable future. I believe this council can do more. I believe there are now good examples in England of councils re-equipping themselves to be more active in the housing building market through the establishment of council-owned housing companies. I would like to work with my colleague leaders and the cabinet member with responsibility over the summer months to determine whether an approach like this for us with a view to bring forward an evidence-based proposition for council for consideration in September. I'll send this to all councillors now on email so they can read it for themselves, because I read that quite quickly. If the Chief Executive is minded, if the officers are able to deliver on that.
Yeah, the Chief Executive will just give us some clarity on this.
First of all, I just echo a comment that Councillor Murphy made. The leader has sent me a quick note. You can appreciate it's unusual for him to leave the chamber at speed, so there is a reason. But he also just wanted to indicate that he is actually supportive of the proposition or the altered motion that Councillor Petruni has just put forward. From an officer perspective, I think it's a good motion. Both pre and post May 17, I've had the opportunity to sit in this chamber and listen to all sides of the chamber articulate very clearly that there is a shared desire to do more in terms of providing housing in Monmouthshire. How we provide housing in Monmouthshire, I'm sure will be an interesting debate over the course of the period ahead. But I think there is unanimity within this chamber that we do need to act. The proposition that Councillor Petruni puts forward potentially gives another significant string to our bow. It doesn't crowd out any arrangements or any potential arrangements that we already have in place, but it does give us the opportunity perhaps to be even more assertive in an enabling role within the marketplace. So I think officers will be able to work with the group leaders over the course of the summer months to come up with a proposition which has an evidence base that the council can form a view on. So I think, Councillor Petruni, from my perspective, I'm very comfortable.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And yes, I could support Dimitri's amended motion. I just point out a couple of things that we do actually have potential plans in place to do an awful lot of this, not just with registered social landlords, but also on our own account. And there is likely to be some schemes, or there are likely to be some schemes coming forward to the investment committee in the not too distant future anyway. So this is something we're working on, and more than happy to continue to work on it with the other leaders and the investment committee. The one other thing I would say is that the formation of another company again is something that we're really researching very, very carefully. We all know the criticism that we've come into on other companies that we formed to do specific tasks, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that this one is the right one.
Councillor Petroni.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Can you just call for a seconder before you
Sorry,
continue?
yeah.
No, can you call for a seconder? Is it seconded? Thank you, well, Kevin.
No.
Right, carry on, mate.
Finally. Today we're proposing to start the process of creating a local housing company because of basically what's happened in England, where local authorities have found a huge shortage in the housing supply, housing stock, and Councillor Watts organised Bristol, Cabinet Member for Bristol, member of housing, basically, to come and speak to a group of us concerned about housing issues. And he discussed the issues around housing that was affecting Bristol and what some of the solutions they were coming forward with. And one of them was a local housing company model. I'm interested that Councillor Murphy said that the investment committee was already thinking down this lines. I'm on the investment committee and I didn't hear it.
Chair, can I just say, I didn't say were already, I said was likely to be coming forward too.
Oh, okay, that clears everything up. To be clear, local housing companies are independent, arm's-length commercial organisations wholly or partly owned by councils. The reason why they've been set up, there's many reasons, finances, reasons, but also because as part of the stock transfer, there is legislation via UK government sort of preventing us or making it really difficult for local authorities to take direct control of housing once again. So, in effect, this company will allow us to develop, build and manage homes once again, in effect, allow us to build modern council housing. Let me be clear though, this model does and will be encouraged to deliver a range of housing, not only affordable or social housing, it will also deliver private homes. And the private homes will help subsidise and fund the affordable housing and social housing endeavours. The critical difference is, councillors, we will have control over those percentages. And we won't argue for those percentages to be dropped on affordable housing like private sector companies do across this county. So we feel compelled to bring this motion forward because, in effect, Chairman, the private sector has failed Monmouthshire in a number of ways, both in numbers and the type of housing it supplies. The facts speak for themselves. We are short, by own LDP, 1,300 completed homes of any kind. 257 affordable homes were short by, and there's currently 3,000 people on the social housing register. There are currently 250 homeless applications going through the council, and the council just spends under £300,000 on temporary housing accommodation per year. This is an increase from the last year of 10%. This doesn't even include the cost to this council of social services getting involved, and we've just had a discussion around corporate parenting, getting involved with families who have children who are then made homeless or have to go through a temporary accommodation process. And those costs, I can tell you, councillors, is astronomical. So that gives you an indication of the finances, but also an indication of the devastating social angle. The inadequate delivery of a number of homes and the type of homes this county needs is having on our residents. We are at a crisis point, councillors, and I don't say that lightly at all. House prices, as we all know, as you sure have heard from your local residents, are spiking. Apparently the average house price, according to latest data on the commercial market in Monmouthshire, is £300,000, with a local wage price ratio at 9 to 1. That, in short, makes it completely unaffordable if you live and work in Monmouthshire. Of course, and I really felt obliged to say this, if you own your own home and house prices are going up, of course that is a benefit to you, to your family and to your well-being. But I would urge those people who do own their own home in this county, think of the next generation below you and the generations after them. So maybe your grandchildren and children being able to stay in Monmouthshire where they're born and bred and being able to afford to do so. I think regardless of political opinion, Chairman, everyone agrees that local people are effectively being priced out of this county, particularly local people, and we need to change that. We know from many reports we've had over the years that our demographics are shifting in this county. We're getting a higher age profile, and in short, councillors, it's unsustainable and brings a huge amount of pressure on our services and the social services sector, and we need to keep, as far as humanly possible, and encourage to keep young people in this county. Which brings me to the other area where the private sector has failed us, but we rarely discuss it. With our ageing demographic, we increasingly need, and I'm seeing it on certainly my casework, and I know Labour councillors are reporting to me, adequate housing for older people tailored to their needs, i.e., but not explicit to, bungalows. We're not having enough bungalows or any of that kind of accommodation where people feel they can't go upstairs, or it's not easy to go upstairs anymore, or other requirements. We're just not keeping up with pace. And given our shift of demographics, we really need to start focusing on this area and delivering those homes tailored to older people's needs. I want this council to consider the local housing company model. I originally put it in the investment committee because that was actually the council's own plan, that these such models would go to the investment committee and they would discuss it and therefore develop the details of it. But I'm happy to progress that through this council chamber, so I'm happy. I propose this change where we do so. But in short, councillors, if we do not do something and we just continue to rely on the private sector to deliver, we are going to fail our residents. And if we're going to be a council that enables our residents to deliver and have a good well-being and deliver on their aspirations, they have to have appropriate housing. If we want to be a council that encourages aspiration and social mobility, then they have to have appropriate housing. If we want to be a council that demands social equity and tackle the scourge of poverty, and I would argue housing goes to the core of tackling poverty in this county, then then housing and delivering on housing has to be at the core of that strategy. Without providing people with security or being able to give themselves security of owning their own home, all our other actions, and I mean this, all our other actions in any other regard will not solve poverty or social mobility in this county. Having a place to go home that you can call your own and feel comfortable and afford and not worry about that is fundamental to everyone's well-being, regardless of political view or ability to or income. This motion, councillors, offers the opportunity to do that. It gives us an opportune time with the local development plan starting to go in through to discuss this, discuss with our communities, and to nick a phrase, take back control of housing and deliver what our residents need and what this county needs. And I hope we all take the opportunity to grasp that, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Councillor Howarth next.
Thank you, Chairman, and I totally agree with everything Councillor Dimitri says, and I totally agree with this council in actually exploring where we are and what we're going to do here. I think the time scale of what we're looking at is tight, but if, like the cabinet member says, we are working at and looking at this already, so be it. We've got one council meeting before August, and we're looking to bring this back in September. I think it's really tight. My three problems I do have. First of all, is the massive infrastructure problem we have in Monmouthshire, and it is massive. There's no doubt about that. Are we taking profit before actually investing in infrastructure? Possibly. Are we taking profit, looking for best value out of our sites? Possibly. So I won't support anything really on development unless we have adequate infrastructure in place. It's a mass problem in Monmouthshire. We haven't invested in it enough. I have major issues in my area with national parks, which is causing problems as well on delivery of numbers. I'm national parks. They are not what we would say appealing and supportive of delivering. I think Llanelli Parish, Gilwan, has probably delivered more affordable homes than anywhere in the national parks in the last 5 years. The problem I have is I do have lots of developments there wanting to take place, but actually they've put a levy on them. They cannot build unless they hand over 20, 30 or 40,000 pound. Would you believe that? They've got to hand a cash lump sum over before actually they'll let them build. And I think we're as bad. I remember sitting in this chamber, I remember sitting in Leisure Centre in Usk and arguing my cause and my direction for affordable homes in 2012. I thought 60% was crazy for the rural communities. And we've been let down on that also. Nobody wanted to listen. Nobody did anything about it. I thought it was too high. I have people ringing me now with our planning department causing problems on not delivering sites which were put into our LDP. Rightly or wrongly, but they're there. We've got to do more. The NIMBYism will be there, we know that, and I don't have any issues with that. They've got a fair argument, they have a fair argument. I still believe we need to do more, but we need to be more focused on what we do. And we seem to get bottled down in all sorts of criteria and all sorts of little silly things. I mean, we don't actually do things as we should. I propose we add a new district in Monmouthshire, create a new hub, one new hub. We can do it. We've got to do that near the main lines, i.e. we've got to put that where our structure is correct. One new hub. All right, we'd have 40, let's get this right, 43 wards in Monmouthshire, but that may be the way forward. We have the land there, we have the capability of doing that. Filling up our towns with houses, I don't think is the way forward. The company, yes, I think we've got good direction if we formulated a company to actually investigate and do and drive that forward. I'm not happy with our housing associations. No way am I happy with them. The way they treat our tenants, the way they treat our residents is not good. So yes, timescale, Dimitri, I think is very tight to get this right, but if council goes along with that, I'll endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Giles Howard, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad to Councillor Petruni changed his motion, so I'm able to support it. I think it would be easy at this point to get involved or sidetracked into arguments about the LDP and the location of new housing, so I'm going to try and not do that. However, I think even if a new LDP would deliver 5,000 houses over a 10-year period, if we set affordables at 20% of that, that barely scratches the surface. So this has to be the way to go. We can't rely on the private sector to deliver what we need. I'm still not alarmed, concerned that even this model, whilst it'll be much more beneficial than the private sector, still isn't going to bring enough housing in the way that sort of the post-war council house building schemes did, and ultimately that would be my preference, because we can see where that has happened, and there are larger schemes. It can work depending on local factors and the design of the scheme. But I think this is a useful first step, and I'm certainly very supportive that this is the route we should take.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Blakeborough.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, love this idea. You have no argument with me, Councillor Petruni. When looking at it, I just think we could be even more imaginative with this. If we want to move away from large, boring estates, we could empower citizens to design and build their own homes, sort of co-production with the council, where the council sell them a plot of land, they work with the council and an approved list of architects to build their own home. It also allows us to be more innovative in terms of new building practices, new materials, getting ideas from Canada and Scandinavian countries, looking at lifetime homes, those kind of things. Definitely, council housing is one part, but I think I would like a mixed model. So yes, you've got the private, the market sector, you have the council sector, but co-production is another new way forward, which other councils have tried to great success. And what happens here then, it avoids silos or ghettos of poor quality and poor design builds. So we have to avoid that. I would definitely explore the working group. I think you're absolutely right to put a time on it, timelines to ensure that this proposal does go forward and doesn't get kicked into the long grass. So I do support that. I do think September is a little tight. But as Councillor Howarth has said, if that's the way the council goes, I will support that. I would also say we could link all of this into the brave discussion that we are starting to have, and we should have, and Councillor Howarth has brought this up, at the new settlement. I think we need to look at the new settlement in Monmouthshire, and also link it into this investment programme as well, because I think there's opportunities there. So thank you for bringing this motion forward. As I say, I love this idea. I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watts.
Yes, Chair. I'm sure, I hope Paul will remind me that I'm right, but I think recently had a special economy and development meeting on Friday afternoon, I believe, and we brought in a consultant, so I apologise to members, I can't remember specifically what they're called. I think one chap was from the Mendips. What were they called, Paul? B group, whatever. But essentially what the guy said there was this. It's quite startling, really, that our average working age in Monmouthshire is 48, and that's disproportionately high when you compare it to Cardiff and Newport, which I think is 34. To bring that down to 46, we would have to build 20,000 new homes. Now that's a startling statistic. If it's right, then we have to do something now. But I do think that we have to move forward. We have to move forward fast, and I think we have to work day and night to make this happen. It's the disproportionate amount of money as well that people are paying on rent is pushing people into poverty, and that's kind of clear certainly in Bulwark, where the average is around about 30% of the children that live in our wards now are living in deprivation, and that's because the proportion of money, as I say, going on rent is pushing them into that. So we have no choice. So if we are really serious about future-proofing Monmouthshire, we have no choice to do this. We can't rely on the third sector, the housing associations. And I think what's particularly interesting statistically about the housing associations, that whilst approximately half of the housing associations went over to housing stock transfer, and there were mixed opinions about that, the delivery of housing within Wales is predominantly come from council housing. So it's still the councils that are providing the housing across Wales that's proven to be successful. Housing associations, I don't believe, have necessarily got the bite, the willpower, or in fact the expertise to deliver exclusively. So we have to interject, we have to do something. So if we're talking about being corporate parents, we have to, if we're serious about doing this for our children, we have to do it now, because our children cannot afford to hit on the housing market. So the price to, I think, earnings to price on average across Wales is 6 times earnings. That's average, 6 or 7. I think Kelly said it was 7 earlier on. I think if you go further into London, it's around about 17 times earnings, and that's into obviously the wealthier areas. In Monmouthshire, it's something like 12 times earnings. So it gives you a level of how out there it is. It's not attainable really for young people. So we have to do something. I couldn't support this motion more. I'm quite happy to work day and night with officers to find a solution to this along with other councillors. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Joe Watkins, please.
Thank you. I completely commend this motion and will be very happy to work alongside all parties to try and bring it forwards. It's a certain situation at the moment that I am contacted by residents saying that they are moving out of Monmouthshire. They can't afford to live in Monmouthshire, and this is the young people who are moving out of Monmouthshire. So as has already been said, we have a situation in which our young working age people can't stay in Monmouthshire and live and work here. They have to leave to go and be able to afford houses of their own. I'd really like to see a mix of both socially owned houses and houses which are developed in a means of easier to buy ones, maybe without big deposit schemes. It would be great if we could look forward to find some ways to actually bring people into the housing market, but at an affordable level. But this is a really important area and one that we really need to work together on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Alan Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously I support the motion, as do most people, and I think we'd be very silly not to, but I think before we start to run away and talk about number of houses and things, we also have to look at the wider picture, and we need to look at the infrastructure that goes with the houses we build as well. And I think the Public Service Board, I know, have had discussions, and the Nire and Bevan Health Board are looking at neighbourhood care networks and that sort of thing, and the sort of facilities that are required to look after our elderly people within the community so that they don't end up in hospital and they don't bed block and that sort of thing. So I think fully supportive. We need to build houses, but we also need to build communities, and that's at the heart of what we're trying to achieve and what the Wellbeing Act is trying to achieve. So I think a part of these discussions we need to involve other people as well and talk about, rather than just building houses, which are vitally important for the well-being of the people in Monmouthshire and everywhere else, but we also build a community that also addresses some of the major social issues that we have, as well as housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer, no, Mr. Tony Easton. Tony Easton next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I support this motion. I believe that certain parts of the county are at a tipping point in terms of public perception on what is there for them for the future. And quite frankly, my questions later relate effectively to where we are talking today. Everything has been said on this motion, I totally support. We failed to get the LDP moving. We've done half of what we're required to do. There's a reliance on private housing developers coming in and looking at snatching pieces of land to put a number of houses on. That's causing concern with members of the public. They feel that enough is enough. The word of infrastructure has been used, and I think that my questions later will be very similar to the way we're talking now, the answers I hope to get. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And clearly I'm happy that we're going for the officers reporting on this. And in that regard, I think it would probably be a good idea at this stage to ask Deb Hill-Howells to open the book, so to speak, at the investment committee, because we've got an awful lot of work in the pipeline, much of which has been referred to today by members saying we wish it would happen. Well, I think we've probably got to the stage where we can say how far we've actually got with it. We're looking at new settlements in the LDP, so we've even identified some potential places, and that they'll go through the LDP process. We almost certainly will be bringing forward a site soon where we'll be putting the infrastructure in, or the proposal is that we put the infrastructure in and then sell the plots off to SMEs and individuals who want to do self-build. So all of the stuff that's being spoken about this afternoon is in fact in the pipeline, and I suggest that we start off at the investment committee to make the members of that more aware of how much progress we've already made.
Thank you. And the final speaker, Councillor Penny-Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I support this motion. But I'd just like to say that credit is where credit's due, because I would urge members to go and look at the housing estate in Raglan that we've already discussed for local, given for local residents. They're called Forever Housing or something like that, and they're designed for young people to go into now, or any age, but they have the potential to be altered easily and adapted at a later stage. And that's what we need. Please, please, please don't try and put me in a bungalow just because I'm getting older. But really, these houses are absolutely ideal. They have... oh, that'll be a home, not a bungalow. But they have space for lifts, actual lifts to go up to the first floor. They have places for the stair lift to be put in, and they have wet rooms downstairs. So, you know, can we think along those lines when we're going forward? Thank you.
Do you want to sum up to me?
Yeah, just briefly touch on all those points, starting with the latter. Penny, absolutely right. That's why I explicitly mentioned older people and being able to tailor housing appropriate to their needs, and having a housing stock and to be able to do that. Totally agree. Phil, Councillor Murphy, thank you for telling us what you've been doing. It's not sort of concerned that we only get told now with an opposition motion, but I suppose better late than never. Infrastructure, it was in my original speech, and as whenever when you write a speech, you sometimes skip through bits. Infrastructure is absolutely critical. I think it's the main cause of NIMBYism, actually, is they usually accept the housing argument, but they always are concerned about the infrastructure around it. And Councillor Easton's absolutely right, and I know other councillors have mentioned that. And I think you don't get rid of NIMBYism, but you ameliorate it by showing and demonstrating that we've really thought about the infrastructure, and that having a company that does this enables us to have some control over that. Other things mentioned by Councillor Blakeborough and Councillor Watkins about other forms of delivery and maybe citizens getting involved, I think that's why I sort of talked about putting an investment committee originally, because we can have those discussions and actually whether they're financially feasible in a kind of pink paper environment. So absolutely, I'm not opposed to any of that. Let's have that discussion. What I'm quite keen though is, and why I think the September date relates to the other points raised, is that's why I asked the Chief Executive whether it was even feasible, and he felt it could be done, was we don't, as Councillor Watt said, we can't allow this just to drag with all these wonderful, ideas that take us a couple of months, 6 months, then a year, discuss, and then the house prices have already maybe gone up by 20%, and we haven't done anything. So that's why I put the timeline on. Absolutely right about working young people, and the irony about the bridge tolls dropping, that increases the house prices, therefore excluding young people, but also with the bridge tolls dropping, allows young people, or makes it easier and more financially viable for young people living in Monmouthshire to commute to Bristol and get the jobs. And Bristol offers amazing opportunities in all different kinds of sectors. And with the tolls being reduced, and if they could afford a house in Monmouthshire and have less financial restriction crossing the bridges to get the jobs in Bristol, that is the perfect scenario where we keep young people in Monmouthshire. At the end of the day, Monmouthshire is a stunning county, and to stay here and get the job opportunities in a close by city is the dream scenario. I hope I've covered all the points. I'm glad there's going to be support across the chamber, because quite frankly, regardless of your political opinion, everyone needs a home.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. Will all those in favour of Dimitri's motion please show their hands? I think it's unanimous. We now go on to... She's not going to leave us. We now go on to questions, and we've got a series of questions. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I've had apologies from Sarah Jones. She will reply herself, and of course, Councillor Fox had to leave, and Councillor Green is not here. My first question is to Councillor John. Take it as it is read, Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, fine. Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, I'll do a general preamble to that, because a lot of all of these questions do, in fact, relate to matters which will be covered by the LDP, and we do have to be very careful that we don't preempt anything that's done by the LDP. So, if I may, I'll just read out a situation on that. The Council has agreed that work should commence on a new local development plan for Monmouthshire for the period up to 2033. Work on that plan has begun, and this will come before Council in the coming months to consider evidence for levels of growth and its spatial distribution, with associated public consultation and engagement. Alongside this, the relevant stakeholders such as the Education Authority, Highways Authority and Health Board will be engaged to understand the infrastructure capacity required to support levels of growth in different locations. These matters will be a key part of the new LDP. In the meantime, those stakeholders, including Highways, Education and the Health Board, will continue to be consulted on all planning applications for major residential development, in other words, more than 10 dwellings. And infrastructure demand will be taken into account by the Planning Committee when making those decisions. So all the answers that will be given by the relevant Cabinet members will have that statement behind them.
Kelly, do you want to say anything? Kelly, do you want to add to that or not? No. Did you understand that, Tony?
Yes, yes, Chair, I understood that. Are you going to answer that part of the question, or have I got a supplementary? How are we going to deal with it?
Sorry, your answer will be of a similar nature. It's all rolled into the LDP. So you can go through it if you wish, and every different Cabinet member will answer you. Or you can accept the situation.
I understand Councillor Murphy's position. That is the future of the LDP. But the questions I've got are where we are today, and the points which we made earlier, where we are at a tipping point for infrastructure and matters in the south of the county at the moment. In fact, at a council meeting in Caldecott last week, 50 people came blowing their heads out because we're not delivering anything. So talk about the future LDP, fine. We need to talk about where we are now and what's going to be done now or the next number of period of time.
Right, Councillor John.
Thank you very much. Well, notwithstanding the points that Councillor Murphy has already made, I want to add a couple of points, namely that the Local Education Authority is a statutory consultee of the local development plan and is going to be fully involved in the emergence of that plan. The scale and the location of growth is yet to be determined, and that will inform the need to increase school capacity in the areas that you've outlined. Further to that, the school access team is working closely with the planning department to understand both the type and the scale of new developments in the area, and that's above and beyond the known live birth rate figures. Where there's insufficient capacity within the existing school sites, Section 106 agreements will be negotiated with developers to ensure that there is sufficient capacity. Currently, we've got 601 surplus places in the Caldecott area, of which 260 are in the primary schools. In the primary sector, there's a range of surplus places, and there are three primary schools where we've got surplus places of between 20 and 30%. So you can see there is capacity.
Hold on a second. What is your point of order,
Point of order is the quote of 601 surplus places in the Caldecott area. Where are they?
Okay, I don't know whether that was your supplementary question or not, but if I can just finish my point and then I'll come on to that. So there are 3 primary schools in the Caldecott area where there are surplus places of between 20 and 30%. It's an issue that I discuss regularly with head teachers. Indeed, yesterday I was in Castle Park Primary School and discussed the issue there with the outgoing head teacher, Mrs. Ford. Indeed, last week I was in Mega Church in Wales Primary School, and I also visited the co-head teacher in Undy School, in Undy Primary School last week, and this is something we've discussed. So clearly it's something that we're having regular discussions with head teachers about. Your question about where the 601 surplus places are, I can tell you that there are no surplus places currently in Roggett Primary School.
Councillor John,
there are 90...
I'm sorry to... You're allowed 3 minutes, and those 3 minutes are now up. So can you just wind...
Well, there was a supplementary as well.
Yeah, well, he'll come back to you on that one. Hopefully not.
3 minutes include, because there were 2... There was his original question, which I was halfway through answering, and then he came back with the supplementary.
My leader will tell you why.
Your leader is not in the chamber, but your head of paid service will try to help you. As a responder to a question, you have 3 minutes. That's what the Constitution says, and it's designed to, I guess, encourage clarity, and that's just the way it is, really. So everything you can pack into 3 minutes, pack into 3 minutes. If you can do it in 2, some of your colleagues will be appreciative, but 3 is the tops.
Okay. Well, Chair, I've now got the supplementary, and I apologise for stopping. The supplementary question is, Councillor John, as part of the Sudbrook building programme, an amount of money has already been committed by the developers for education. There will be a further settlement due from Crick Road. When will you be putting forward specific plans to use these packets of money? Do you believe, for example, the Dewsall School, which was originally planned for a 420-place school, is able to be upgraded? And equally, possibly the Durand School, which has space for development, can be catered for. And do you believe there is a need for a rural catchment area as the Caldecott School will not cope?
That was about 6.
All right, I'm afraid I couldn't quite hear all of that question, but
just for balance in this debate, when you ask a supplementary, you're going to ask a question. A question that runs at 3, 4, or 5 doesn't count. I took one breath. Yeah. So you're legitimately entitled to stab at one of those. I'm just trying to encourage good process. One question, one answer. I think that's fair to the whole chamber. No. Because a questioner and an answer has to be fair to the whole chamber.
To be fair to Councillor John, I will let this be answered later because there's a question mark on the other matters.
Okay, well, if I can respond to that, I can send you an email with those figures if you want a precise breakdown of the 601. But as I said in my answer a little bit earlier, there obviously is a split there between secondary and primary. So I will email you those figures so you've got the breakdown of where the 601 surplus places are. I know there are concerns in the Caldecott area about school places. It's something I've been in correspondence with with Caldecott Town Council about. Indeed, I've been invited to attend their meeting on the 10th of July, I think, from memory. So I will be attending that meeting and trying to address a number of the concerns that they have about this issue. But as I said, I didn't quite hear your full supplementary, but I'll watch the tape back. And if there's some additional information I can email you, I will do so.
So the second one of your questions is...
I'll take the second question that was read, Councillor Penny-Jones.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got, I'll be a minute, if that, in light of what has gone on before. But I would like to just say that the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board is a key consultee of the LDP, and discussions are already underway to ensure that engagement in the new LDP is more effective than it was in the previous LDP, and it will be more fully involved in the emerging plan, which is something I think that Councillor Eason was getting at. The scale and location of growth is yet to be determined, so no numbers are available and we can't just pluck them out of the air. And that will inform the need to increase primary healthcare capacity and how this will be delivered. And obviously that's an area that we'll be keeping a a firm eye on. The Health Board has to work with all authorities regarding population expansion and an increase in numbers, and this is reflected through the resource mechanism of the NHS. So that is all I have to say at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eason.
Yes, I'll keep my supplementary brief. Will you get the ABUHB to meet with members to hear our concerns? Also, the slow decline of facilities at Chepstow Hospital must be reversed. What will you be doing to address this decline?
Sorry, I can't.
No, I couldn't hear that either.
Right, I'll try again slowly then. Will you get the ABUHB to meet with members in the south of the county? And also, will you be able to stop the slow decline in Chepstow Hospital?
Well, sorry, that's absolutely impossible to answer. I mean, the slow decline of Chepstow Hospital. You know because I've kept you informed that negotiations are going on at the moment to increase its capacity and to make it more community friendly. So, that is a different issue altogether that isn't actually related to this. But the members, yes. I can only reiterate what I said, that the Aneurin and Bevan Health Board have to be involved with the local authority at all stages. So that is all I can reiterate at this point.
Thank you. Right. The next question, Tony. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. The Local Highway Authority and Welsh Government Transport Division are statutory consultees on the LDP and will be fully involved in the emerging plan. The scale and location of growth is yet to be determined, and the impact on highway capacity is therefore unknown, as are solutions. Officers are minded to progress a local transport plan in parallel with the LDP to align and coordinate the highways, transport and active travel requirements going forward. This will feed in, as appropriate, to the strategic transport plan to be prepared on a regional basis. Thank you.
One question, please.
Yes, a supplementary.
One question.
I'll take one deep breath.
I had two.
Since the adoption of the current LDP, public services have been drastically reduced with no signs of an upturn in them. Commuters relate to rail service to be hit and miss, with poor service along the Gloucester line serving Cardigan and Chepstow. Would you support a reopening of Port Scoot Station, which would help Councillor Fox, and also promoting the station at Newhouse Business Park?
I'm afraid I didn't hear that again.
No, I had a job too.
It must be my. Can you hear me now? It must be the speaker. What I said was, since the adoption of the current LDP, public services have been drastically reduced, with no signs of an upturn in them. Commuters relate to rail service to be hit and miss, with poor services along the Gloucester line serving Caldicot and Chepstow. Would you support a reopening of Port Scoot Station? And I said Councillor Fox would like that, and also promoting a station at Newhouse Business Park.
Just say your email back.
The opening of new stations is not in my gift. I'd support it, but there's no point in me standing here and saying, yes, I'll support a new station, because, getting a new station is not a 5-minute job. What I can say, and I've seen, the new rail people, Keola, what is it? Yeah. Very interesting organisation. I think we're going to see a dramatic difference in our rail in Monmouthshire once they take over, and I'm quite looking forward to it, actually, and maybe even able even to get to a rugby match and get back home.
Thank you.
Councillor Eason, Councillor Eason, are you listening? Yeah. Your next 3 questions are to members of the Cabinet who are not here. All right, what would you like to do? Would you like written answers, or do you want to put it on next month's agenda, or do you want to...
Councillor Sarah Jones said she'd respond to me.
Right.
If Councillor Fox and Councillor Green could do the same, that's fine.
Fine, okay.
Councillor Jordan.
So you go to your question to Councillor Jordan now.
Take it as read, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. The community boundary changes took account of the 5-year forecast in electorates and allocated councillors based on those forecasts. The review applies to the whole of the authority, and changes to the arrangements are overdue. And members will recall my statement to Council in April, where I set out the timescale and what had happened previously.
If the proposals are approved by Welsh Government following the consultation and recommendations from the Local Democracy and Boundary Commission for Wales, then the authority may review individual communities rather than hold a county-wide review in future, which can reflect changes in demographics in individual communities. Thank you.
Councillor, no further questions. So now your last question is to Councillor Phil Murphy.
If Councillor Murphy could take it as read.
Okay, thanks for your question, Tony. And in relation to that question about financial pressures, priorities and how they get dealt with in relation to a new LDP, again, I would caution against getting too ahead of ourselves. I don't have a crystal ball and none of us knows what is going to play out yet, so I can't answer your question with any precision. However, what I can tell you is that new house building and housing completions contribute significantly to our financial sustainability. If we are in a position as members where we have growth and additional housing recommended to us, in my view, revenues raised from new house building could, and I emphasise could, see us offset the resource demands that you foresee. In addition, growth in population and households would see likely upward adjustments to the Welsh Government funding settlement, which, as you know, is population-based. And I've just lost that thing. Bear with me a minute. Sorry, the screen has just completely disappeared. Bear with me a sec, I'll have to get it back.
I think Councillor Murphy said sufficient there, but can I have a supplementary now?
Yeah.
Right. This is one sentence.
One question, though.
One sentence.
It's not the number length of the sentence.
Councillor Murphy, do you consider that prudential borrowing may be a necessary way forward to put improvements in place in tandem with and not after the developments are completed and regarding the LDP process which is being reviewed will be fit for purpose, especially as outline planning for Church Road development in Cardigan is being challenged because of its departure from the LDP?
Not only is the longest sentence, but I could have done with it being substantially longer in its delivery. I can answer that quite simply. Any prudential borrowing has to be supported by an absolutely watertight business case, and we'll look at everything on its own merits.
Can you comment on the Church Road development in the absence of the LDP?
Right.
No, because I haven't got sufficient detail in front of me, but if you'd like to email me on it, I'll get you a response.
Thank you.
There are no questions, right?
It's a plea, Chair. Today we've had more than one person basically complaining about the acoustics in this place, and if you don't into this thing, it's difficult to be heard. Can we please do something about it? I've stood up many times and made this plea. Even if it's training for us to actually know what we've got to do. So please, let's do something about it. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, go on. Penny Jones.
Chair, I presume that's the end of business as such as it on the agenda. I'm sure all members are aware that our Chief Officer for Social Services, Safeguarding and Health, Claire Marchant, is leaving for pastures new. And this is her last full council. And I think really that's why she was hiding. Anyway, from a personal point of view, I'd like to thank you, Claire, very much for all the help that you've given me since I became a cabinet member in May. Your knowledge is limitless regarding both the adult and children's services, and for a large directorate, that is an asset which will be hard to follow. On top of that, you're always willing to communicate and on matters big or small. nothing is too much trouble, and I will miss our one-to-ones and your cheerful disposition. So on behalf of the Cabinet and all the members, I'm sure, of this council, I'd just like to wish you well and hope that you really enjoy your new post, and I want to assure you that you will be missed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Petroni.
Is to add to those sentiments, Chairman, and to add that when you first walked in to the interview process, I believe there was 2 of you as full council, I think it was a collective feeling you were within, I don't know, maybe a minute, this was the right person for the job, if memory recall. But we also kind of knew it wouldn't be your last permanent job. I think there was a discussion about that. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about that now, are we? That you would move on. But I think we said that in terms of complimenting you, that it was clear this wouldn't be the last, because you know your drive and ambition was clear, and it came as no shock, but with great disappointment, that you will be moving on for us, because we're going to lose a great talented officer. So on behalf of the Labour Group, I want to echo those sentiments by Councillor Jones, and I've been led to believe that it might be Rob Tranter's last.
No. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I will be here, not to steal the limelight.
Oh, great.
I will be here on the 6th of July.
Oh, great.
I will ignore
So the extraordinary meeting for an extraordinary officer, there we go.
Please, if you please.
Yeah.
I don't usually do this, but actually, Claire justifies it. Dimitri, you're right. For those of you here on that day, I've seen some absolutely stellar interview performances in my time. Claire's was probably top 2 in my entire career. It's hard to deliver an outstanding interview performance. It's even harder to carry that through authentically into a really, really difficult job. So I think on behalf of your colleagues, we've loved having you here. I think you've proven to be an authentic vocational public servant with amazing knowledge, amazing patience, and also that all-important glint of steel, because you can't do this job if you haven't got it. We'll miss you. I think you know that. We wish you well. We expect you to show your face around here every now and again, because part of our DNA is we don't say goodbye. We just wish you well. Take everything that you've learned here and apply it. Well done.
Would you like to say a few words?
I won't say too much because I've been crying all meeting, but that is an eye infection, honestly. And it's very humbling to hear those words. It's an absolute privilege to do this job. It's been an absolute privilege to do it in this particular council. I have learned a huge amount. You're very kind about the interview. You took a risk on me. I didn't have a background in children's services, but I've loved absolutely every minute of having the opportunity to really get stuck into children's services here in Monmouthshire, and to work with colleagues right across social services, and not just within the council but outside of the council, who really care about this county and its most vulnerable citizens. So thank you so much from all sides for the support you've given me, because as you know from experiences elsewhere, the success of social services is dependent on that support from the whole council. So I'm deeply indebted to you all for allowing me to do the job I've done, and I'll miss you all, and I might be back. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all very much indeed. An hour longer than last month. I'm sorry about that, but we'll try to get back on schedule next time. Can you all please remember that there is a special council meeting here on the 6th of July, 10 a.m. in the morning at the moment. You must diarise it. It's an important day when we're to appoint 3 new senior officers. So please be here. Thank you all. Have a good, safe journey home.